Welcome to Tabletop Warden. This time is a special episode because this podcast is part of this month's Guild Drop about the Night's Watch faction. And today we are joined by a Night's Watch expert from overseas, which is Brett Lanpher. Hi, Brett.
Hey, guys.
And also Ilya is with us, who is also a passionate Night's Watch player. So I think we are ready to do this.
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.
Yep.
So about Night's Watch, I personally don't. I personally am not a Night's Watch player. I mainly play other factions, but I see Ilya play them very often, and so I hope that's working out for us today. So for the Night's Watch, as an outsider, I have the feeling that Night's Watch should be an elite faction, and that's the general theme of this army. Can you get a bit more into that? What's the
So,
theme
Brett,
of...
would you like to start with that one?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're the guest here. So.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think by their design, if you think back to the beginning of the game, which
Yes.
Not all of our listeners have been playing since the beginning, but just to touch on it really quickly, ever since they were released, they were kind of coined as what Michael Chanel, the creator, would call a toolbox army. So they were equipped with tools just to kind of deal with every situation. Their deck and their vow system has a card for most situations. The basic deck has just the one card that's like an active playing card. You play it when you attack. That's the Sword in the Darkness. It's a very strong card. The majority of the rest of the cards are kind of reactive cards, but Night's Watch was designed to be able to let you hit them, and then with some of their reactive cards and their staying power, they were supposed to kind of burst back to life and kill you in a grind. That's kind of what I got as their design. You've got the Veterans of the Watch, who are supposed to be the premier defensive unit with their counterattacks, their 3+ defensive save, and their above average morale. They are like a point holder. They're supposed to be the unit that gets up onto an objective and they just threaten you to sit and score points the whole game unless you deal with them. But going into them can end up causing damage to you with those counterattacks. And then their vanilla attacks, but since they don't lose really any attack dice, they're kind of dangerous until the last rank. The Sworn Brothers are supposed to be like the blender unit. They're the heavy hitting, critical blow and sundering with a good amount of attack dice. They're supposed to be the unit that kind of alpha strikes or just comes in and cleans up whatever's bogged down by the veterans. And then you've got the Ranger Trackers, who function as support. They dish out vulnerable tokens for the heavier hitting units, or they're capable of moving around the battlefield, getting to flanks, getting to rears, and then using those vulnerable tokens on their own ranged attacks in order to multiply the damage that they do. And then we've had some things added to the faction. You've got the War Machines with the Builder Stone Thrower and the Scorpion Crew, which are just, they're war machines. They're designed to pick you apart from a distance and then let other units come in and finish you off. The Conscripts came in. They're the only cheap activation that's available to the Night's Watch, minus the solo Marshal, who's incoming. We'll get to him later. But they're kind of your throwaway unit. They're a unit that's just kind of designed to tar pit. They're not going to do massive damage with their attacks, but they can go intercept cavalry, or they can be a shield for taking some of those ranged attacks and slingshotting your other units in. And then you've got the Builder Crossbowmen, who arguably one of the best ranged units in the game. They cost 7 points, but with so few ways to stop orders, if you play the positioning game with them well, they have to charge them eventually to get rid of them, right? Because long range with sundering is very dangerous. But when they do charge, presumably they're going to be getting shot on the way in. So a very interesting unit there, the Builder Crossbowmen. I've come to appreciate them a lot more. And then, am I missing anyone?
The Ranger Hunters, I guess.
The Ranger Hunters. Yep. They're just a very specialist kind of unit. I've liked them from the beginning, but at their initial release, they weren't a super competitive choice. They were just really fun to play. They've got a hit and run style of attack. Their old ability was
Opportunist, I guess.
Opportunist. Yep, Opportunist. Yep. So they got rerolls if you hadn't activated. So with their ranged attacks, they could do a little bit of damage, but they were kind of limited with their short range attack. And then they've been changed to where they can hit you, retreat, and then fire into you. So now they're really versatile. But for 8 points, they're a glass cannon kind of unit, but they are very, very fun. And in the right matches, when you're not severely out activated, they can do a lot of damage. So very, very fun unit to play. Very thematic if you like the Rangers, which I do. And so they're definitely capable of doing lots of damage to low armor targets, but they're a very specialist unit. So
yeah, so I personally agree with almost everything Brad said. My personal problem right now with the Night's Watch is that I think the entire concept of an elite army is not working out as intended, probably by the designers. Reason for that is quite simple. We have units like Conscripts. We have a lot of ranged options in our army. And the meta right now showed us that, well, this entire elite aspect of this faction isn't working out quite as well as people would like it to be. And on the other hand, if you're playing lists with a lot of conscripts, if you're playing ranged dedicated lists like gunlines, they're far more successful, especially against very static factions like Baratheons or Lannisters, which is, in my personal opinion, a bad sign, because I didn't choose the Night's Watch as my main faction to be, the gunline player or to be the conscript player or something like that, because I wanted an elite faction. I wanted to have like 4 units on the table with extreme powerful abilities, stats, and options to do a lot of things in one round to decimate my enemy with strategic and dedicated plays. But if I compare Night's Watch right now to something like the Targaryens, which are, in my personal opinion, right now the elite faction because of their basic deck, which allows their units to perform multiple actions in a round, and units like the Unsullied, which have extremely good stats, can't be watered, can be just shut off. And I think, yeah, Night's Watch is a very fun army, and like Brett said, they are a toolbox army. You have a lot of very cool options, especially their NCUs. I think are probably the best NCUs in the game, maybe the most versatile, because they fit this toolbox theme like extremely well. Every NCU in their army represents like a specific mechanic in this game or an aspect of this game. Like, for example, Donald NCU is the defensive NCU. You have Ammon for the heals. You have Corrin Halfhand, who is like a mix between control and offensive powers. And I very, very like their NCUs. And their initial release with the starter box showed us that, this toolbox idea is quite cool, because you have like Swarm Brothers, who are basically the scissors in your starter box. You have the veterans, who are the rock, and you have the trackers, which are the paper. And it's very cool, it's very thematic, it's very stylish to play, and it's a lot of fun. But in the end, it turned out to be not as impactful as I would like it to be. And in the meantime, a lot of players, myself included, have changed up their list drastically. I think the main reason for that is conscripts, because they are insignificant and because of the current panic, rules. I really do like Night's Watch. I think that this faction right now is just not in a good place design-wise. I think units like the Scorpion, like the Stonethrower, and the Conscripts have thrown this entire concept of an elite army overboard and changed its identity into a drastically different position. But it's just my personal opinion on this matter. So take everything I say with a big grain of salt. And yeah.
To be honest, the current meta doesn't favor Night's Watch that much, but I think new releases like the Marshal can fix it. I think at the moment, the current state of the meta, just a few words here. We have factions like Starks or Freefolk having the upper hand at the moment, mainly because they have more activations, more wounds on the table, and also more actions where they can do stuff with. And everything is something which a more elite style faction or elite style list, which Night's Watch can certainly bring, struggle a bit with. But I think there will be a few changes in the future, which will address this, because it's an issue for a longer time period. And yeah, I think Night's Watch are still a very good faction, but struggle in certain matchups, which you need to take into account, which forces you to build different lists. For example, with a lot of conscripts, like Ilya said. But I think still this old list concepts are still worth playing, and I think we can dive deeper into it.
Yeah, just on that note, like the old concept of having an elite army with those 4 field activations is still working. Like, in my personal opinion, Night's Watch and perhaps even Lannisters are the most well-balanced factions in the game right now. It's just the case, as you said, that the meta right now is not favoring them. Like, they struggle a lot in the current concept of what should you bring to the table. But as a faction overall, I think they're very, very balanced. Like, if everything else is getting tuned down a little bit, like especially Starks and Freefolk, I think Night's Watch would be in a very good spot. Like, yeah.
And Brett and you all mentioned that Nightwatch are a toolbox army, and besides the unit combinations, which we talk about later, there's this war mechanic, which is unique to the Night's Watch, which also makes it a bit harder for Night's Watch to field neutral units, because most of the Night's Watch basic tactic cards have an initial effect and also a second effect, which is a wow effect, where you can attach this card to one of your units, and based on the zones you control, these cards will get active and grants you additional benefits, which is a quite nice mechanic and something you need to learn to play around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're totally right there. I think the vows are like the unique mechanic just to the Night's Watch. It's just make them differentiate itself from everything else in the game. Like, vows are such a unique mechanic that they can't basically be turned off by cancel effects. They are immune to that. And I like that. I really like the idea behind the vows, because as a toolbox army, those vows allow you to, as Michael said, just take a basic look at your Swarm Brothers. They're like, as I said, they are the scissors in your army. They're like the warriors, right? Like in an RPG, there would be like the, I don't know, maybe, yeah, the warrior class. And then you attach a vow to them and unlock a second class to them, like a minor class at level 15 or something like that. Well, you get the point. So you basically attach Shield of the Realms of Men to them, and suddenly they're getting a lot of very cool defensive mechanisms as well. And yeah, I think this concept of a toolbox army, the idea behind it is amazingly cool. It's very well designed. It just doesn't work out in praxis as well as people would like it to. But as I said, maybe I'm a very pessimistic about it. It's just, you know, stuff from my experience that I'm just rambling about here. So maybe Brett can, you know, enlighten us on this topic a little bit more.
No, I don't fully disagree. I am also a big fan of the kind of the 4 combat unit. When I was running John and Alistair, planning to going into Adepticon way earlier this year, which obviously Adepticon was canceled, sad day. But I had a John list that was, you know, John with 2 units of veterans, a unit of Sworn Brothers, and a unit of Ranger Trackers. And then the Alistair list had Alistair and veterans, and then 2 Sworn Brothers. And this was prior to kind of getting involved in the worldwide meta from TTS. I wasn't playing TTS at the time, so I didn't really know. But once I started to get into some of these lists that kind of abuse the high activations, which a lot of the American players weren't doing prior to being mixed into this kind of European meta. Prior to getting into that, the list was successful because at some point they had to come and they had to attack your more elite units, and then you were able to kind of withstand that punch using Ammon and maybe Donald Noy to take that initial hit. And then after that, once they were kind of stuck, you could grind them down. It worked as it was intended. But once you start to see how big the change to the panic is, we won't go into the way that panic used to function, but for anybody listening, everybody knows that panic, you live and die by panic in this game. And it's got a way bigger impact than maybe they intended for it to have, because you've got units like Free Folk Raiders who are 3 points, but they're capable of sneaking just 1 wound in there, just getting you to fail 1 defensive save and forcing that panic test. Maybe you don't fail the initial one, but over and over and over again, when you're outnumbered so badly by like these Stark units and these Free Folk units in particular, you're eventually going to fail a panic. If you take 5 panic tests at 50-50, you're going to fail. And what happens is you take 2 to 4 wounds. A panic token makes it reliably 3 to 4. So then you're starting to lose, because of panic, more wounds than your NCUs can heal. And now you get put into kind of a desperate sort of situation where me playing John, I see my Sworn brothers, they're holding strong. Trappers sneak 2 wounds in. I crit fail a panic test. Now suddenly my Sworn brothers are down to 6 wounds, and I've not got the resources to heal them back up. So then you've got to kind of make some desperation plays that you didn't normally want to. So in my case, it's taking Ghost and attempting a 6-inch charge, hoping that I fail, just so that I can trigger Stand United Brothers to heal my Sworn brothers. That's not how I wanted to play that card. That's not the situation I wanted it to be in. But playing those lists in like the TTS format, that's the situation I find myself in. I'm not really dictating the flow of the game like Night's Watch is supposed to with their reactive stuff. I'm supposed to be able to dictate, like, you're fighting me, you're going to have to make these big plays to bring me down because I can heal so much. But instead, they're grinding them down so fast that they're dictating the flow of the game, even with armies like Free Folk. And now I'm the one that's making desperate moves trying to stay in the game. And it just feels a little bit opposite of the way that it's supposed to be. And I think if you play like a 7 activation Alistair list, yes, his cards are very good and he's got an element of control. But again, going back to how you can grind those units down, a couple of attacks with failed panic tests, and you can remove that 7-point unit from the field. And it's not just Starks that are capable, or not just Free Folk that are capable of doing it. Starks with their sudden charges and their value activations like Sworn Swords are so good for 5 points. And in a straight up fight, sure, the Sworn brothers at 7 should take the Sworn Swords down, but if the Sworn Swords sudden charge in and then they get a second attack, that little 5-point unit can decimate those Sworn brothers. And even units like Mercenaries for Starks, they're not great for Night's Watch. What are you going to do with Mercenaries and Night's Watch? Put a Watch Recruiter in them? Like, they're not a great fit for Night's Watch, but for Starks, they're bringing a wolf with them, and then they've got the ability to turn those 7 attacks into something special. And it's just so tough. I guess it's the point cost, which, they're designed to be elite, so they're going to be expensive. That's fine. I'm happy with that. What I would personally like to see, of course, I'm not a designer and I have no influence on that whatsoever, but if you're coining this army as the elite army, I would love to see just a really quick patch where every Night's Watch unit across the board gets a +1 to their morale. So now Sworn Brothers are a 5. Veterans are Berserker level at a 4. It's not unreasonable to have a morale 4, but it just gives them a little bit more survivability, because I think you can probably relate to this, Ilya. Normally what happens to me is I fail this panic test by 1. Like, I need a 6, I roll a 5, there's a 3 on the D3, down goes 4 guys. And
every time my veterans are failing a panic check, I just want to flip the table. Like, it hurts so much.
Yeah, and that's the most hurtful thing to me, is I've got this unit that's so hard to get through with just sheer attacks, but it's the panic that's killing them. They're not dying because they're failing a lot of saves. They're dying because they're just getting attacked so many times, and then they're just panicking to death.
Yeah. So overall, we can say Night's Watch struggle a bit with the with the panic rules at the moment, and I think that is a weakness of that faction. But there are some commanders which can mitigate this, and also some I would say newer builds where panic isn't that big of an issue. And I think now we heard a lot of where the Night's Watch is weak at. Maybe we can move on to talk about what is great about the Night's Watch, and I think they have very good units, especially at the offensive side. One of the units I find especially cool are the Swan Brothers. They are your core unit, the man who mends the wall, and yeah, I think they are great. They have a very good offensive profile. Also, they have Sundering and Critical Blow, and I think with units like them, you can provide an offensive punch to your enemy and be proactive and be aggressive with them. Or how do you use them in your game?
Just on a little side note, sorry to going back to the topic, but just I wanted to chime in on Brad's idea of having +1 morale across all the Night's Watch units. Like, thematically, this should be the case, because those guys on the wall are fighting mammoths, giants, undead people. Like, they have seen so much horrific shit, and they should be like already the bravest people out there in the entire Westeros. Like, maybe not Unsullied level, but still, right? So if a unit of Lannister guardsmen, or no, halberdiers, sorry, has the same morale level as a unit of Swarm Brothers, I think there's something wrong. I don't know, but yeah, I totally get Brad's idea here. So yeah, but sorry, yeah, on the Swarm Brothers, they are the working horse of this faction. Like, I think there is no list without at least one unit of Swarm Brothers, because for their 7 points, they have very good stats. You can make the point for, as Brett said, for their 6+ morale, which I also would like to see at 5+ at this moment, because they can get very fast decimated by enemy attacks. Especially Lance Cavalry is a bane to Swarm Brothers. But on the other hand, if Swarm Brothers get into the right position, get, for example, the advantage with cards like Watcher on the Wall, if they alpha charge something, it's going to be devastating. Like, those guys with Critical Blow, Sundering, Sword on the Darkness on top of that, maybe even, I don't know, some other cards in the game that, or attachment that allow them to get more dice. Every single dice on Swarm Brothers is extremely powerful. And they are like the equivalent of a Lance Cavalry for the Night's Watch, just without the free maneuver. And they can
Which we come to later.
Sure. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. But before this new attachment drops, they were like basically the equivalent of a Lance Cavalry, and they can do like a lot of damage. I really like Swarm Brothers. I really do. I think they look very cool and very thematic. They are the guys, as you said, who man the wall. And I just wish they had a little bit more on the defense side, because this unit costs 7 points. And even a unit of simple Sworn Swords can just devastate them if they get alpha charge, which I personally don't like. I totally understand why they have 4+ armor, because they don't have like a lot of great tools on the wall. They can't just make like the best armor in Westeros and stuff like that. Yeah, but the morale aspect, yeah, probably they should probably be at 5+ to just compensate that a little bit more. But yeah, overall, Swarm Brothers, I think they're probably, I don't want to say the best unit in the Night's Watch, but they're one of the best units. Totally. Go ahead, Brett.
For me, they're the best. I just can't not bring them. Like you just said, it's your opponent has to recognize that unit on the table. Because, as you mentioned, with some of the card combinations, now add Khorne Halfhand into the mix, which I think almost every Night's Watch player is now aware of how powerful he is. And it's not just for his attachment, or it's not just for his sacrifice. Like, yes, that's a bonus, but I rarely actually sacrifice him unless I absolutely have to, because the +1 movement and the +1 attack is just so good. Now you're looking at, with a Sword in the Darkness and controlling the swords, you could potentially have 11 attack dice with that unit. If you've got Lord Snow, it's 13. It's pretty insane. 13 attack dice with critical blows and sundering. There's not much that's going to survive that. Now, pairing that with the Ranger Trackers that we already mentioned, they're vulnerable too. Even a 3+ defensive save unit isn't really very safe. Mix in Alistair to make them panicked and vulnerable. It's like one-shot area for any unit. So, yes, they're very good. They have a very high ceiling. They have great potential. It's proven to me that those elite styles of lists that I was running just aren't working, because what I found is that people who are seasoned and understand the flow of the game and understand playing with patience, they're just going to disregard the Night's Watch veterans. They're not even going to care. If you want to watcher the Night's Watch veterans and try to make ends meet with them, they're much happier with that. They're going to go kill the Sworn Brothers. They're going to kill the Sworn Brothers, and then they're going to try to make you win the game with Veterans of the Watch and Ranger Trackers, and it's going to be very difficult to do. So that's what I found. And then you mix in, Lannister crossbows, who are a bargain at 6 points. And then even Stark bowmen, who create that bubble that they can shoot you no matter what if you dare to come into their zone. And they can just pick those Sworn Brothers apart and then send something in to charge them and finish them off. So it can be a little bit scary. I know Targaryens aren't the greatest faction in the world, but like the Dothraki veterans could make very short work of Sworn Brothers. It could just be one charging volley and they're off the table. So
Sorry, go ahead.
I do love Sworn Brothers. Like I said, I don't leave home without them. Not just with one in every list, and it's probably some of my stubbornness where I just can't let them go, because, like Ilya said too, I love their models. They're, in my opinion, probably the best looking unit for me. Their pose is just so dynamic, and I just love those flowing robes, and the guy with the sword over his head is just amazing. I love
he will punch very hard, I guess. and so at the end, the Sworn Brothers are a very hard-hitting unit, but even with I say average defense save and an average morale, they're pretty class cannon-y. Not as much as other units in the game, of course, but you have to take care of them. And I think that's still a cool unit, because they're, like you said, there are ways to buff them. And I think if you play around them, it sounds that they can work perfectly fine. And I think another unit which can buff them, like you said, they have this rock, paper, scissors combined arms approach, are the Ranger Trackers, which are the cavalry unit which comes in the core box. And I think that they have a great order to head the Sworn Brothers out.
Yeah. So for me, what's Sworn Brothers for Brett? For me, that's the trackers. Like, my personal opinion, trackers are like the best unit we have. Like, they were the best unit before all the changes happened and even afterwards. But that's just my personal opinion, because every single list I play, I always include a unit of trackers, because they proved again and again to me that their mobility, their 6-point cost is so efficient on the table, and they can do a lot of work. Mark Target, probably one of the coolest abilities in the game, just allowing you to drop down those vulnerable tokens where you just need them to enhance, for example, offensive capabilities of your Sworn Brothers. Even veterans can do damage out of a sudden with the help of those trackers. And yeah, the 6 speed on a cavalry unit is just tremendously powerful, in my opinion. and helps in a lot of matchups, especially against, like, again, against static armies. Baratheons, for example, struggle extremely hard against trackers, especially because of their range capabilities, which are 7 and 4 dice on a 3+, which is not bad at all if you consider that you can just use your mobility to get very easily into the enemy's flank or back, and then, you know, shoot at those enemies for -1 defense, -1 panic, and they can dish out extreme amount of damage and can catch people off guard. Also, in an auto list, you can enhance their offensive capabilities even further, giving them critical blow and rerolls on the ranged attacks, giving them even vicious when they are in the enemy's flank, and allowing you to drop down weakened tokens, which is kind of crucial to the Night's Watch, because as we mentioned before, they are not the sturdiest faction. They can be, of course, because of all the healing potential, but they really need to enhance their defensive play to stay alive and to overcome whatever is thrown at them. And those weakened tokens are helping there in the long run a lot. And yeah, I guess trackers for me are like the best unit out there, most cost efficient unit probably as well. And with the newest attachment, they are just straight up my most favorite unit in the game. Like, I just want to play them constantly in every list. It's hard to do, but I managed to build a lot of lists with the trackers and this attachment with the Watch Marshal. And this is a powerhouse unit. I love it. I love every aspect about it. But yeah, Brett, go ahead.
I can't argue with it at all. I know that I said I include Sworn Brothers in every list. That's true for Ranger Trackers as well. They're in every single one of my lists. So there's I have 13 points that are spoken for always. 1 unit of Sworn Brothers, 1 unit of Ranger Trackers. They're just too good. And one thing that a lot of people sleep on, I don't know if you do this yourself, Ilya, Ranger Trackers are more than capable of charging. I know that they would prefer to dance around and shoot, but if you've got a unit that's down to like 3 wounds and you just really need to get that unit off the table, and maybe they're engaged with your unit, you don't want to force the panic test, they're more than capable of charging in with 6 attack dice and even hitting on 4s with the rerolls. With their own vulnerable token, they should be able to do some damage. They're also really good at alpha striking units like Tully Cav. So you don't want the Tully Cav charging you. Pulling up next to them and shooting them, you're not going to do enough to kill them. Certainly, probably not even enough to wipe down a rank, and then they're going to just blast you with that really nasty charge. But if you send your Ranger Trackers in, they're a little bit more survivable than people think. So for a ranged unit, I think outside of the teased Lightbringers and the Dothraki Outriders, who are dedicated ranged, the Ranger Trackers actually have the best defense by way of defensive save and morale. Like a 5-up defensive save isn't horrible for a ranged unit. And then a 6-up morale is actually good for a ranged unit. So they can get into that combat with Knights of Casterly Rock or the Tully Cav. Knights are a little less favorable. Nobody really wants a Lannister supremacy, but it's better than being charged. And they can just go in there and kind of tie that unit up. Like, okay, you've got 6 attacks hitting on 3s, but that's fine. You can sit there and take that grind with them and just get them out of the battle long enough for your other troops to get in and clean up some of their stuff. I also will charge my Ranger Trackers into other archers, other crossbowmen, not the Night's Watch ones, unless I'm charging the flank. But Lannister crossbowmen, Stark bowmen, Stormcrow mercenary archers, definitely, I'll charge into them. That's fine. And then they're not getting their ranged attack, and they're going to have to try to either retreat and be able to shoot me, or they're going to swing at me with their daggers, and I know that's fine. Yeah, eat your heart out. So they're a versatile unit. They're a versatile unit, and they're really good in the secret mission scenario too. So I know that the Germans, you guys, you're not crazy about the secret missions, but a lot of times they're popping up in some of these TTS events, and they're starting to see the light of day in some in-person events that are being scheduled. So it's something that we kind of have to deal with. But Ranger Trackers are so good in those missions because they do several of those missions well. So they're good for the sacrifice and action on a token. They're good for the 3 of the same type of condition token on one unit, or on different units, like 3 vulnerable tokens throughout the army. They're good at the 3 condition tokens of the same type because they can use the horn that wakes the sleepers to put a weakened or a panicked, and then the letter can provide the other, and they provide their own vulnerable. They're great there. They're also good at the charging one because they're fast. They're good at attacking in the flank. So for me, they have a lot of value, but then even in the secret missions, they're really strong in those as well. So I'm a huge fan of everything they do. And when the situation calls for it, like I said, they can charge. You can buff them with the Sword in the Darkness. And if you've played the Horn that wakes the sleepers right, you can drop it off of the Rangers after they make their 8 attacks and then pick it up with your Sworn Brothers, which is where you probably want it anyway. So I like them. Very versatile, very strong, fast. Yep. So, yeah, I just completely agree with everything that you said. I'm very excited for the martial attachment as well. I think with Othel's cards, being able to double tap a unit, potentially buffing it both times with some of Othel's cards, it's going to be really tough for units to withstand those 14 shots.
Yeah.
Nice. So at the end, it's very versatile and well-rounded and well-performing unit. I think next we can talk about the conscripts, even if we just mentioned them a few times earlier in this podcast. I think the conscripts are a bit controversial, at least for you both, because I think you don't like them as much as other players do. So just to the conscripts, they are a 4-point unit, which has insignificant and also has reinforcements. Insignificant doesn't allow your opponent to gain victory point. No, sorry. Your opponent doesn't get victory points to victory to combat, and also reinforcements lets you heal wounds when they activate. And besides that, they have a 5+ defense and 8+ morale, so they are more on the weaker side, but have an attack on a 4+ with 7 attack dice at the first rank and 4 and 3 dice at the other ranks. And a lot of players say they are a good unit for 4 points, especially because they're insignificant. What do you think about that, and why you don't use them that often?
You want to start with this one, Brett? I guess we have like almost similar opinions on them, so go ahead.
So with conscripts, my struggle is it's a mental struggle because I want to play into the elite Night's Watch. I used to kind of say it was a little bit snarky or smart alecky, whichever term you prefer. But when people would tell me like, "Hey, you should try conscripts," and I would say if I wanted to play Free Folk Raiders, I would play Free Folk.
So, that's my point as well. Like, totally.
But I'm gonna fellow guild member and senior builder himself, Carlo. Him and I have had some conversations via PM, and it was actually after my game with you guys'. I think you guys know him, Affenkoff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he ran those 2 giants, and I nearly had a giant dead, but we won't go into that. But giants are such a problem for me, and so after that game, I was like, if I'd had a unit of conscripts just to feed to that giant, just charge the giant and let him beat up some conscripts for a little while, I could have had my Sworn Brothers free to go devastate his raiders and the rest of his army, because he had those 2 giants, so he was relying heavily on them. But giants just play so well into that elite Night's Watch. Like, veterans against giants, they just don't stand a chance at all. If all you have left is veterans to fight a giant, you're never going to kill the giant. All you're going to do is piss him off, and then he's going to crush your veterans. Sworn Brothers are your best chance, but you need some really good dice rolls or a really nice 1-2 turn. But it's hard to get a 1-2 turn against free folks. So giants are like the nightmare of Night's Watch Elite. So I was thinking, yeah, maybe if I had some conscripts and I could tie that giant up, it might have been a little bit better. And then I started trying them, and I really hate to admit it, they're good. They're really good. It's insignificant is such a powerful keyword, but it's not just the insignificant. So if you think about the conscripts as like, if it helps to think of it from a fluff perspective, you can think about like you're just sending the conscripts out to get hit by things you don't want your elite stuff. So you're vanguarding with the conscripts. They're setting up your watcher on the wall for your better units. They're setting up your now his watch is ended plays. Because a lot of times watches ended can be the card that wins you the game. Like, cool, you get to unactivate this unit and take a second attack, or maybe even take a charge, whatever the case may be. But what's going to die to trigger that card? Ghost? You can, but isn't it so much better when it's a unit that doesn't give up victory points? You get the vow back from them, and you get to remove an activation. It's like a game swinger. Like, you don't really care if conscripts die. Like, obviously, you don't want anything to die, but if it's conscripts, it's like, well, it's fine because I'm going to pull my Horn That Wakes the Sleepers, draw 2 cards immediately, and or you pull your shields back. You know what I mean? Like, I'll put shields on the conscripts, just knowing that they're going to die eventually, and I'll get that card back, and then I can play it a second time.
Yeah, but even if you place shields on the conscripts, they get even more tankier. So there aren't that much attack dice in this game that that you would say shield doesn't block a certain amount of them, and I think the amount that shield blocks is at least equivalent to 1 wound, or maybe even more that it blocks in the end. So shield gives you a lot of sustainability on this conscripts, and they even heal back wounds when they activate. So I think in the end, even with a relatively low defense and low morale stat, they are quite tanky because first you have the ability to block with shield, and also you have the ability to heal. And I think if you play around the Wealth Zone, I think conscripts can shine because you automatically heal 3 wounds instead of D3, and I think you can make conscripts very reliable and a very good blocker unit for 4 points.
Yeah, I just hate those guys. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. I hate them in every aspect. I think they're just trash. But yeah, game mechanic wise, it makes a lot of sense to play them. And lists including 2 units of conscripts right now are the most successful for the Night's Watch, which just breaks my heart because, as I said, I think they're just thematically. I don't want to play a pseudo free folk army, which is like, you know, if I play free folk, I could include like a couple of raiders and play some couple of elite units. This would be exact the same thing as me playing a couple of conscripts and playing a couple of elite units. But free folk does it in a lot ways better than Night's Watch because they have the cards to support this gameplay style. They have cheaper units even than the Night's Watch. So I didn't get into Night's Watch to play this pseudo free folk stuff, but in the end, as I said, right now you probably have to if you want to be successful with Night's Watch. I just really wish that conscripts would have been a unit that's not just be out there for, you know, being the meat grind unit, to be the meat shields, to be more like representing the aspect of the Night's Watch where you get recruits to the wall and they are forced to fight even without like great training, but they can adapt to the situation and learn on the battlefield, like getting better, like gathering experience and becoming slowly but surely sworn brothers, which is the entire, you know, thematically reason why they are conscripts on the wall. Like they are men that are becoming sworn brothers. They're getting trained, they're taking the vow. But yeah, right now conscripts are just you know, murderers, thieves, getting thrown in there, getting sacrificed. I just don't like it. I just really don't like it. But yeah, as Brett said before, gameplay wise right now, insignificant is a huge deal, especially in modes like, for example, Clash of Kings, where conscripts can come back and just, throw a wrench into the enemy's plan by just tar pitting him everywhere they can. And they can become one of the most annoying units in the game if you include stuff like, for example, Jair Commander, who can make them pass a panic check. Because their greatest bane right now is probably their 8+ morale, which is also comparably to the Raiders' morale. But as Free Folk players tend to say, like, I have 8+ morale. I accept my guys to fail that. But if I succeed this panic check, boy, oh boy, I saved a lot of wounds, and my enemy's like, oh shit, now I'm in trouble, because he's stuck in there with this unit he don't want to waste time on. And in this moment, conscripts as well are becoming one of the most annoying units in the game, just like Poor Fellows, just like Raiders, and so on. And the Night's Watch has a lot of capabilities to keep them being annoying. Ammon is a great tool. Craster is a great tool. Shields of the Realm of Men is a great tool. But also stuff like Fire That Burns Against the Cold. Like when those guys activate, they heal wounds and can dish out a weaken token as well with that fire, making them even more annoying to fight against. And I had the most success with those guys, for example, throwing them into a unit of Rose Knights. Like, let those Rose Knights stand there and fight those conscripts. No one's gonna win. Like, the Baratheon player has to invest a lot of resources to get rid of those conscripts. And as a Night's Watch player, you don't even have to attack those Rose Knights. Just stand in there, engage with them, and heal up all the time. Keep them busy so that your trackers, Swarm Brothers, whatsoever, are free to do whatever they need to do. And yeah, mechanically, conscripts are working out great. I just wish they didn't. Like, it's hard to explain. I'm just very stubborn, just like Brett. I just really don't want to play them, but my hands are tied in this. Right now in this meta.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned Jor Commander, but you know who actually was. I almost feel like he was designed for conscripts is Jor NCU.
Oh,
Jor's NCU.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Because Jor. So if you think about the zones that Jor's influence works for, if you're on the crown, they're only taking 1 wound from failed panic. It's actually a good reason to use the crown zone as Night's Watch, not just to keep the fire that burns against the cold, which you mentioned that, but now you've got double incentive to take the crown for those conscripts. The envelope will stop them from being targeted by tactics cards or NCUs. So it's really unlikely that they're going to lose their insignificant to Walder, and they won't be able to put Cersei on them or anything like this. And then controlling the bags, automatically blocking 1 hit. Well, that would stack with the Shield of the Realms of Men. So they could be blocking D3 +1. So if you manage to grab the bags and the crowns, I mean, they're probably better tar pit than Poor Fellows at that point. The panic is no longer a liability at all. And the defensive blocking D3 +1 is huge. So I've kind of started to come around to Jor as an NCU. I didn't really rate him very highly before because I think that they've just got better choices. But if you're doing the route of conscript, even if you've just got 1 conscript in there to fill out some activations, it would be worth bringing Jor's NCU to shield those conscripts. But I think the other thing that I guess we didn't really mention is fanning out the activations. So with a Jon Snow list in particular, it's pretty easy to get to 9 activations. And then I think if you actually try it, you'll find out that a 9 activation Night's Watch list with Jon's healing, it becomes a pretty big problem. It's really, really, really tough to punch through. And if you've got a couple of Sworn Brothers backing those guys up, you'll find that they're a pretty good match into Free Folk and Starks, which is 2 really bad matches for them. So the way I justify that way of thinking is you look at an expert player like Larks and even Yannick here, fantastic Stark players, but what do they do with their lists? They build out these activations to 9 or 10, and then they've got these kind of, they're not subpar units because they're Starks, they don't have those. They've got some units, honestly, if you look at Larks' list and you haven't played Larks and understood how he plays that list, if you just look at his list, it's like, oh, Outriders, Horn Swords with Bran and Hodor, Mercenaries with Rickon, what's this list really going to do? It's not going to do much. This isn't a hard list. And then he beats your ass with that list. So I kind of
but it's also Larks, you have to take this also into account.
Well, so I took his list building concept in mind, and I was like, well, what if Night's Watch could do that? What if Night's Watch could bring like these 2 conscripts as throwaway units, and then Larks has just got 2 heavy hitters, the Sworn Swords with Brandon Hodor, and then the Outriders. And he makes those 2 heavy hitters shine because of the activation advantage. So now you imagine you're doing that with Night's Watch, and it works. I'm just telling you, it works.
Yeah.
My snow list with 2 conscripts is holding up pretty well. It just works because of the things that we've discussed, and that is able to happen because of the conscripts.
Yeah. Also something which is, I think, very interesting when you look at conscripts. If you have more activations, it's more likely that the conscripts can activate after your opponent has attacked them. So it's more likely that they can heal the damage right away. So even if you have a full health conscript unit, they get charged or shot at or take damage during that round. If you if you have more activations, then you can control when you want to heal them, which is very impactful because if you heal them at the right time, your opponent has more wounds to punch through than he normally had. And the easiest way to kill conscripts is to just attack them after they have activated, because they can't heal the damage. And if you're the first player next round, you just hit them again. And so there isn't a window where the Night's Watch player can heal them. But with more activations, you have a wider window to activate them, to heal them. And I think that more activations also make conscripts better, which is, yeah, they help you to get more activations and also get better because you have more activations, which I think is a quite nice concept gameplay wise, maybe not thematic wise, but for that reason I liked it. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So enough of conscripts, I guess. Maybe we go to at least one additional unit, which I think is also very popular, which is the Builder Crossbowman. And these are the Builder Crossbowmen are a ranged unit with a long range attacks with their crossbows, which hits on a 3+ with 7/7 and 3 attack dice. Their crossbows have also sundering, and they have the order ready aim fire, which lets them make a ranged attack if they are targeted for a charge action before your opponent resolves the charge. Also, they have a 6+ defense save and a 7+ moral stat, which is quite normal for ranged unit to have very worse defensive abilities. But I think offensive, they have a great profile and a very cool order ability. And I know, Ilya, you played them a lot for some time, so maybe you can enlighten us how to play with them and what you need to worry about or need to look at.
Sure. Crossbowman, yeah. So after the starter box got released, we got the Scorpion, right? This was the first unit released for the Night's Watch. And after that, immediately after, we got Crossbowman, which is still like kind of mind-boggling to me, because in my personal opinion, the Crossbowman made the Scorpion obsolete for a very long time. Everything the Scorpion did the Crossbowman way better. They have the mobility, they have ready aim fire already included for 7 points, which is an amazingly good ability, because it forces the enemy to do something about those crossbowmen, thanks to their long range and sundering attacks, as Brett mentioned before. But he needs to charge them. And if you position them right, which is not a hard thing to do actually on the battlefield if you have, for example, those conscripts running around as well. He just needs to engage them up front, or has to, play around them in some way, which is hard to do because of long range. And those guys can dish out like tremendous amount of damage, especially in an auto list. The Mighty Enhancement is ridiculously powerful on them, giving them critical blow and rerolls, turning them into a pseudo Swarm Brothers unit at long range, like hitting hard as a lance cavalry at some point, and allowing them to devastate just an enemy unit in one attack. Of course, it all depends on your dice rolls. Like if you get a couple of 6s in there, totally worth it in most cases. And if you combine them with units like Ranger Trackers for the vulnerable token to set up a very powerful attack, which also works on long range, I think this unit is probably one of the best units in the Night's Watch arsenal. Especially because, as I said before, they made the Scorpion like kind of obsolete. Maybe this changed right now after the attachment box because of a specific modification and thanks to the senior builder. But I still prefer the Crossbowmen just because of their point cost of 7 and because of ready aim fire. Because I think in a concept of an elite army, if you have just a couple of few units on your table, those units should get like a better action economy than the rest of the factions out there. And Crossbowmen, in my personal opinion, are doing this extremely well. 7 points and an additional attack action, which you have to set up. So it's not just a free attack. You really have to play into it. You really have to set up them. You really have to manage your maneuvers and your positioning. And I think they're just well designed, a very great unit, and can just be extremely powerful. One great tip is, for example, if you are playing a scenario with objectives, you can place down stakes so that the enemy also has to charge through those stakes to get into those crossbowmen, and you can place them on one of the table edges, which allows your crossbowmen to just move up, position themselves in just such a way that they can never be charged from the flank, always just from the front, and they're just sitting there and controlling this area this entire game, denying the enemy points, objectives, and so on. And if you include, for example, a couple of attachments into them, I'm not a great fan of attachments personally on them because it just makes them a little bit more expensive. But I heard stories about, for example, Piper, which I also played a couple of times, but was not quite into. But Crossbowmen and Piper can be, they can be just ridiculous. Like this free shift thing when you attack, after you attack in combination with ready aim fire makes this unit like a, I don't know, catch me if you can unit. Like you can try to charge them, but most of the time you just will not reach them, and they're just gonna sit there and shoot at you all the time. Yeah, I like Crossbowmen. I think so far, maybe excluding the attachment box, they were the greatest release for the Night's Watch. Probably the best release after the starter box, considering that we got the Stormthrower, which is Garbo. It's just not playable in its current state. The Scorpion and the Ranger Hunters, I think Crossbowmen were the greatest release so far for the Night's Watch.
Yeah. So, Brett, what's your opinion? How do you play them?
Ilya actually did a really nice job of covering some of their strengths there. The way I view the Builder Crossbowmen in an awful list is I think of them as like Sworn Brothers that are charging, but they're 12 inches away. So giving them the rerolls and the critical blows is just insane. Especially considering that when you put half hand on them, he works on ranged. So you take half hand to the free attack, and you throw down Mighty Enhancement, and it's like a free attack from Sworn Brothers with rerolls. It's pretty disgusting. And then additionally, you've got giving them Vicious. In some matches can be even better. If you use the vulnerable token from the Ranger Trackers, you're pretty well guaranteed to push that damage through. So I think against maybe Rose Knights to stop them from healing, or against Knights of Castle Rocks that you don't have to deal with Lannister supremacy, you can throw Vicious onto that attack. It's pretty nasty. Yeah, I just think they're really good. And then the Ready Aim Fire order has major implications, because not only are you shooting them when they charge you, but especially if it's like slow infantry, you can shift 2 inches away from them before you shoot, so then their charge is even further away. So it's kind of a little bit like having Rob's tactical. It's not tactical regroup. It's superior positioning. It's something like having that card all the time. It's 1 inch less, but a lot of times you can shift yourself out of charge range. Like if they needed a 3, they go ahead and choose to charge you. If they have that split second where they forget about you shifting backwards, now it's a 5. They might even fail to charge. They're a really good match into Baratheons. I didn't make this as a tournament list, but it's on my slate of lists that I'm working with as a possible pairing with Jon Snow. It's 2 Builder Crossbowmen in an Author list, and it is ridiculous if you play that into anything but Starks or Free Folk, maybe other Night's Watch guys, but armies that are slow, like if they're a foot slogging army, they don't stand a chance. Being honest, it's like I played it against a pretty solid Baratheon player, and he quit after round 2. He was down 2-0, and it was just the game was over. I took out his Bastards Girls very quickly because I out-activated him. So I got the Builder Crossbowman and set up a 1-2 shot. Boom, down go the Bastards Girls. Then I set the other Crossbowman up to be charged by a unit of Wardens. I didn't really care that they got charged. They shot them, killed 5 of them when they charged in. And then I played Watcher on the Wall, and I marched them up to the flank of another unit. And then I shot the flank of that unit, and they were dead. And then he was down 2 units by round 2, and he just quit. Like, he wasn't mad, but he was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what are you going to do? If you don't have cavalry, or if they can double tap that cavalry and remove the cavalry from the game, what are they really going to do? What are guardsmen, poor fellows? You know what I mean? What are they going to do about that list? They're not going to do anything. They're going to get shot and shot and shot, and they're going to die. And it's really brutal. You should try it against the slow kind of Renly lists, or these Lannister heavy infantry lists with maybe one unit of knights. Like, after you kill the knights, you've won the game. What are they going to do? Even if they do catch you, they're not charging you in the flank. They don't have swift advance. What are they going to do? They're not going to do one single thing about it.
Yeah,
they're going to get turned into pincushions. So yes, I have come to really appreciate the Builder Crossbowmen. The one time I kind of tried them out, I think they got an unfair shake because I played our local Stark player. He's a really strong player, and I had Alistair in crossbows to take advantage of prey on the weak. But it was only a 7 activation list, so he just took his Tully Cavaliers and played Winter's Coming and blew Othel off the board. So I was like, these guys aren't really that good. But then after I gave him a fair shake.
But to be honest, that shows that you need to be careful with them. As an opponent, if I'm playing Starks, for example, I have Winter's Coming, or if my lists include Walder, there are ways to get to these crossbows, but you need to think ahead what you want to do against them, because not every list has that many tools like some high mobile Stark lists have. So as an opponent to this crossbows, you need to think about what can I do against them, and you need to use your tools at the right time. And as the Night's Watch player, you need to know what your opponent can do against them, and if you outplay your opponent, or if you manage to deny these opportunities to your opponent, I think the crossbows are a really great unit.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I think from the normal units, I think we have covered most of them, at least the most interesting and most used ones. I think we can go to solo model which will come in the near future, but the rules already are out. We are talking about the Watch Marshal, his solo variant for 3 points. He's a cavalry unit and has 2 wounds, and he has 2 abilities. First is his martial abilities, which includes the cavalry ability and also buffs ally units within short range to give them +1 attack dice on melee attacks. And also he has the Order Followy, which is also known from the Hammer attachment from the Free Folk, which says when this unit performs a maneuver or march action before moving, target one other friendly unit in short range. After this unit completes its maneuver march, the targeted friendly unit may make one free maneuver action. Yeah, I think his ability, especially Follow Me, is what makes him shine. And I guess it opens up new ways to build the Night's Watch. And I hear it from you guys that you're testing out new concepts, thinking about how to rebuild Night's Watch armies, and maybe some more elite lists can work, for example, with the Swan Brothers, which you mentioned at the start of the podcast.
Yeah.
Brett.
Yeah, I think with Follow Me, you can turn them into kind of a pretend cavalry unit. So obviously they can't make the maneuver on their own terms like cavalry can, but being able to move up the marshal and kind of shift them up. Or the bigger thing for me is turning their position around. If you've maneuvered past them or you've marched past them or something to where they can't see you anymore, being able to use Follow Me to get them back into position is huge. But additionally to that, it's the extra activation. Now, this guy's not going to go charging in and do a bunch of damage, but that's not what he's there for. So the way I envision him, yes, you've got some pretty hard counters to him. Walder doing the whole 1-2 damage thing, and Axel just completely removing him from the game at activation if he puts a token down on him. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem, but you can counter those. You can bring Varys. It's unfortunate, but I feel like Varys is not necessarily a must, but he's a pretty solid way to keep him alive because you only need him for the first couple of turns. But hypothetically, now I've played against Axel with my Ghost in a Jon Snow build. Potentially, it's a super predictable, super obvious play. If you let them throw that influence down and you let that guy die and you have Watches Ended in your hand, you can really use that to your advantage. But it's kind of a double advantage with Jon, because you could potentially, in the case of Walder, if you activate him and he's taken a wound from Walder or whatever, and then he gets his last wound and you're in short range of Jon, you get to unactivate him again. And then you've basically gotten 2 activations out of him that round. So if you play around knowing what they're going to do with that, you can turn it into a pretty big kind of a snowball effect on them. Because when I played Axel, I just let Ghost die. I had it shall not end until my death in my hand, but I just let him die because I removed the activation token from Sworn Brothers and I charged his Bastards Girls and blew them off the table. So for me, it was a worthwhile trade. So, yes, Axel and Varys can do something about them. Or Axel and Walder, sorry. You can bring Varys to counter it, or in the case of Walder, it's as simple as bringing Craster or Ammon, because Walder's got to go down onto the board, and then Craster can take the wound off, or Ammon, no matter what zone he claims, will be able to take the wound off. So, Night's Watch is in an okay position as far as those guys go. A little bit better spot than Starks, who don't have just healing NCUs without conditions. You would have to have like Eddard NCU and make a charge or something and use him to heal the wounds so that your dog didn't get 1-2 shotted. But I think even with those guys considered, I think it's fine because, yeah, like I said, you only need the solo to live until maybe round 3 to where you can use his activation advantage to set you up for the game. And then after round 3, if he dies, it's fine. Hopefully you've got
watch is ended by that time, or you can just annoy them with "It shall not end until my death," and it's pretty frustrating when they influence a big NCU like Walder and commit him to, okay, well, I'm going to use the wound just to kill this guy, and then they don't kill him, and now Walder was used to shut off a bigger unit. So Night's Watch has a little bit of counterplay as far as that goes. So I'm pretty happy with the guy. I'm pretty eager to use him. I really like the fact that he and Corrin are going to combine for +2 attack dice is pretty big.
and then you have a John attachment and have +2 additional attack dice and
Sword in the Darkness for plus.
It's a dream combo, yeah.
I know that Ilya wants to try this one day, right?
yeah.
You can potentially get 14 attack dice with Lord Snow, and that's it's so disgusting. You probably, if you manage that, Ilya, you probably are going to have to just go home and take a shower because you're just going to feel so. Like I charged in with 14 attack dice and I scored 19 hits.
Yeah.
And I brought Othel and I brought Precision, and I just re-rolled everything that wasn't a 6, and I had 7 6s. So they were like double dead. It's just really, really nasty. Yeah, I ran Lord Snow initially when I was kind of trying to do some different stuff with Night's Watch. This was before COVID, so it was around January or so. I ran Dario Commander, and I know that's not the subject that we're talking about right now, but Dario Commander with Forced March combined with that Night's Watch Marshal, you could really boot, scoot, and boogie those Sworn Brothers like 15 inches, like really quickly. And depending on the scenario, they could be in a really, really good spot. Depending on scenario and the opponent, could be pretty nasty. But no, I think it was Ilya that said when you've got these elite units, you need to be getting bonus actions and getting the most out of that unit. He's a really good way to help you get the most out of your guys. I like him to close that gap. It definitely fills in an issue that Night's Watch have had, which is movement. So I just really like the guy with Jon Snow because I'm in love with Jon Snow anyway. But being able to free maneuver a unit up and then play for the watch, now all of a sudden their threat range has increased 7 inches. So a person who thought they were safe, maybe now they're not, because that's 13 inches guaranteed charge right there. 14 pretty safe. 15 you've got a 66% chance. It's a pretty damn good charge range. And I think we've got the element of surprise working for us right now. So these first couple of games with the Watch Marshal, depending on what route you go, your opponent's going to have to adjust to some of that. Now, obviously, people do homework and they kind of know what to expect, but things on paper never translate to what happens in the game. And the plan that you have for him might translate completely differently. So, and I was just thinking it's really smart that they made that follow me in order, because with Jon Snow and his watches ended, capable of removing a token, if it was just an ability and not an order, you could really, really abuse that guy.
Yep.
They made it in order wisely. Currently, nothing in the game removes an order token, so happily for that. But I think he's versatile. I think in my Jon Snow list, with the one with 2 conscripts, I'm going to drop one of the conscripts out and figure out something cool to do with that 1 point and push the list forward like that. Could do a watch captain in those horribly terrible conscripts just to be able to pull 2 vows back when they die, which is really funny.
True.
It's just really, it's really dirty. It's really funny. Hypothetically, I guess you could attach both horns to them, throw them onto a set of stakes, let them die, and then pull both horns back and draw 4 cards for no reason. Just I feel like
wait a second.
Wait, what?
I think you can only get 1 card back actually with Now His Watch has ended. So you have to decide which one.
I think it says return all vows because I looked at this before.
Oh.
When I was considering the watch captain, you may return. Oh, you're right. You may return 1 attached vow. Edit my dumbass. Edit my stupid comments out because I don't like to be wrong.
Don't cheat us, Brett.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. Okay, I guess Michael had that in mind when he made that. Okay, never mind.
it would have been awesome, but yeah.
Okay, edit out my stupidity from that.
Yeah, my opinion on the Watch Marshal, I think he's by far the best thing that happened to the Night's Watch in a long, long time. Especially because, as I said before, if you have elite units on your table, you should have some sort of action advantage compared to your enemy. And the Watch Marshal right now for 3 points and bringing a action to the table is actually extremely good. He is extremely good. I tested him in a lot of different lists, and I quickly realized that if you are facing off against, for example, Walder, if you're facing off against Axel, as Brett said, they are the bane to almost every solo unit in the game, except for Gregor, which is a topic of itself, I guess, because he's just like ridiculous. But yeah, I think when you bring, for example, 2 of marshals in your list, the enemy at, let's say, at the beginning of round 2 or 3 whatsoever, has always made some tough decisions. Where is Axel going down? Where is Walder going down? Does he really want to focus down my Watch Marshal or Watch Marshals whatsoever? Or is he going to try to deactivate my strong elite units, like, for example, my Swarm Brothers? And 2 marshals for me worked out extremely well. And especially in an auto list, I have a list right now that I'm constantly playing and I had the most success with is a list with 2 Swarm Brothers, 1 Crossbowman, 1 Ranger Tracker, and 2 Watch Marshals. And then I have Crester, and I think I have Corrin Halfhand in there as well. Because of, as Brett said, the aura of the Watch Marshal synergizes very well with Corrin, giving Swarm Brothers additional movement, giving them additional dice, making them extremely powerful on the initial charge. And I managed to, for example, one-shot a unit of Tully Swan Shields. Like, I managed to get into their flank, thanks to the Marshal, charge them, and just one-shot them. It was ridiculous. Like, for the first time, I felt like not being constantly at the mercy of the Starks. For the first time, you had, like, actually options to outmaneuver them, which is like, wow. Like, we are not Targaryens. We only have Watcher on the Wall for those movement shenanigans. But now with the Marshal, everything changed. It's like you can really use this follow me order to your advantage in a lot of different ways. You can outmaneuver enemies. You can outflank them. Again, he's also a bane to static factions like Lannisters and Baratheons, or against neutral factions, because the Marshal is so cheap and allows you to basically out-activate factions, which for a very long time were on par with the Night's Watch activation-wise. Like Lannisters, for example, are most of the time either at 7 or at 8 activations. And Night's Watch was the same, but now with the Watch Marshal, you always have this activation advantage against this faction, against those factions. And the Marshal with his additional action just is so powerful in those matchups. But even, as I said before, against Starks, against Free Folk, for example, as well with Lady Val, with Harma, and all their movement shenanigans, you can now actually stand a chance against them. Like, beforehand, it was like always an uphill battle, considering that Harma has forced march, which is just like bonkers. You can now actually counter that. Like, yeah, she's getting into your flank, but then you're like, okay, I'm going to use my Watch Marshal and turn my brothers around. So what you going to do now, buddy? So it's very cool. I really like him. I really like the entire concept about him. I just wish that he came out a little bit earlier. And maybe if Starks and Free Folk, for example, are getting tuned down a little bit, the Marshal will put the Night's Watch maybe even to the top, like competitively wise.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and yeah, I think he fixes a lot of issues, like you said, and I'm pretty excited to see more Night's Watch, maybe because of him, and yeah, also the senior builder is nice, which we come later to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think personally, Night's Watch seems a lot of scarier than they were before, from a non Night's Watch player perspective, because before I could rely on, yeah, Night's Watch doesn't have that much mobility, only with how it's called, Watcher on the Wall, but
Yeah.
but you can play around this, and the Watcher is pretty obvious when your opponent wants to play it. Um, at least most of the times, good players can hide it a bit better um, than others. But yeah, that this higher mobility makes them even more scary. And I know what your Swan Brothers with John did in some games,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think with a Marshal, they will be even better, and that's exciting, even as an opponent, which maybe get to get on the other side of things. But yeah, perfect.
You know what? But one thing that bothers me about this Marshal is why 4+ defense? Like, isn't he like a veteran? Like, he's even higher than a veteran experience-wise, right? So shouldn't he be at 3+? Why is he at 4+? I don't get it. It's just
Because he doesn't need to fight, he just needs to command, I guess.
I don't know. It's kind of a weird decision. Like, it doesn't change a lot if he has 3+, but this 4+ thing is just like, huh? What? Okay.
It makes him really susceptible to Bog Devil Ambush, but
Yeah, for example, I once I fought a dog. I think it was Shaggy or something like that, and I lost against him because of my 4+. I was like, Jesus, come on, man! It's oh well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think in the end that were the most Night's Watch units which we found interesting for this podcast. We mentioned a few more between the lines, but I think what's more interesting to talk about the other, instead of talking about the other units, is to go to the NCUs. And I think the NCU you also talked a lot about during your talk about the Marshal was Grown Halfhand, which has this one ability where he has an influence which gives +1 attack dice and also +1 to your movement. But also he has a sacrifice effect, so you can sacrifice him at the start of a turn, and you can target an enemy unit, which then can't do any actions for the rest of the round, which is also a very unique ability in this game, and I think he's also very popular NCU for the Night's Watch faction.
Yeah, I just gonna say hands down strongest NCU for the Night's Watch, like without any doubt, because he's so flexible. This influence effect is extremely strong with almost every unit. Like you can put him on Crossbowman, you can put him on Ranger Hunters, you can put him down on Swarm Brothers. Yeah, geez, you can even put him down on Conscripts if you need to get him somewhere faster. Like he's so extremely versatile, so extremely powerful, synergizes very well with almost every unit. And his sacrifice effect, it's like the ultimate high risk, high reward mechanic. Like if you use this at the right time in the game, especially in the later rounds, like 5 or 6, when it's just coming down to, I don't know, maybe one enemy victory point or something like that, or you need to get onto an objective faster than your enemy. If you time this very well, it's a game changer. Just straight down a game changer. It allows you to double down on an enemy unit without it actually getting the option to retaliate. You can also just deny enemies movement shenanigans, which is extremely powerful against, for example, Lance Cavalry like Tully Calf or Knights of Castle Rock. they're just sitting ducks there. And it synergizes also very well with gunline builds, because you can just wait for an opponent to get into the crosshairs of your ranged units, shut him down, and then just shoot at him the entire round. Like, he can do anything about it. I think he is, as I said, straight down our strongest NCU. I personally even think that he might be a little bit too strong, because the change they did to him was necessary, but they also overdid it a little bit in the aspect that you can now do it at the start of any turn. I played Corrin even before he got changed and realized very fast how much potential he has. And back then you had to use him at the beginning of a round. So this lead to you anticipating what the most powerful play for your opponent would be and trying to deny that play. Now it's more like I have the option to just wait, see how things play out, and then throw a wrench into his plans. I think it's a little bit too strong on that side, because his influence is also very, very strong for a 4-point NCU. But yeah, other than that, I think he's just amazingly good. Go ahead, Brett.
No, I mean, you pretty well said it all. As I mentioned before, he's definitely a bargain at 4 points. At 4 points, it's almost worth taking him just for the +1 movement and the +1 attack dice. Again, going back to the fact that I play John so much, John's card for the Watch is really, it's a card that's really kind of slept on. That +2 movement is pretty substantial. Well, when you combine that with Watcher on the Wall and Corrin, it can end up being +4 movement, which it's just crazy to think about Sworn Brothers being base movement 9. So his influence also stacks with the Watcher on the Wall for that march. So if you control the maneuver zone and Corrin's on the unit, and you throw the Watcher and attach it, they can make a 14-inch march. Pretty huge. 14-inch march, and then movement 7 plus for the Watch is movement 9. So they've immediately covered 23 inches. That's like Stark level of field covering. And then the +1 attack dice obviously is always going to be huge. Corrin is another one of those mental things. As the game starts to get into a crunch, I think maybe in the back of their head, some players kind of don't really think about him. They're playing to win the game. So like you said, they move their Knights of Castle Rock into a position because they know they've got tempo the next turn, and they think that they're going to flank charge your Sworn Brothers. And then start of the turn, start of the new round, you just kill half-hand. Now the Knights of Castle Rock are stuck. They're not charging your unit, and they might be sitting ducks. Maybe their rear is to your archers. Maybe, God forbid, their rear is to Sworn Brothers, and they're just going to get blown off of the table. It's a worthy sacrifice just to save your unit from dying. But if you save your unit from dying and you kill the unit that was going to kill your unit, it's a 2 activate. It is a net 1 activation swing, but it's huge. They don't get a victory point for Corrin dying. Man, I really hate talking about nerfing my Night's Watch, because I feel like we play from behind a lot of the time. But maybe that would have helped to balance him out, is if you kill the half hand, they get a victory point, because it's just so bad. Like you said, if it's coming down to the wire, if they've got 2 units left and maybe you have 3, but they're kind of in a position to win it. Like if it's a Tyrion list and he's just got like Tyrion and his unit of knights, normally maybe he'd be able to cunning ploy and make the game win with those knights. But if you Corrin the knights, like they can't even be cunning ployed. If it's Tyrion and only his 1 unit, cunning ploy is off the table. They can't even do anything with it, because they can't activate to give their action away, and they can't make any action, so they can't benefit from it. So it's pretty big. But it's not that way, so we're going to play it the way that it is. And the way that it is, it was huge for me. I just finished my TSL game today. I was in a compromised position, but I had the half hand, and he had like Bowman with 3 guys left in the mountain that rides. And I had my trackers over there, and it's like, well, if I don't sacrifice the half hand right now and stop Gregor, he's just going to charge Gregor into the trackers when I'm going to be in that spot. I froze Gregor and stopped him, and then I was able to kill the bowman, and then as a result, not only did I get a point for killing the bowman, but I took over that board quarter because Gregor's only worth 4 points, and I just won the game pretty much right then and there because of half hand.
Yep.
As soon as I killed the mountain, I was like, yeah, I kind of looked at the state of the board. It's like, unless something really crazy happens, because you've lost the mountain that rides, who you were banking so much on this last round, you're losing the game, and it's not really his fault. Like, it's just I had half hand. I'm sorry, and there's nothing that you can do about him.
Exactly.
So, he's great. I love him. I find it really hard to play without him. He's replaced. Ammon used to always be my kind of auto include, but I think that's become the half hand. I rate half hand more than I rate Ammon. So that says a lot because I'm a big fan of that starter box.
Yeah. And yeah, as an opponent, I can definitely agree with that. It doesn't happen that often anymore to me, but it's really you can't play that aggressive as you want to be with an aggressive faction, and you can only make plays when your opponent has half hand on the tactic spot, because then he can't be sacrificed this round. And yeah, if he is off the board, it pressures you to just play a little bit safer. And I think even without him being sacrificed, that's a huge advantage the Night's player gets out of him.
Okay.
Right. And yeah, I think as next NCU, one out of the starter box, which is Ammon. Ammon is a heal NCU. He can, when he claims the tactic zone, he heals 1 wound and 1 additional wound per destroyed rank. So 1 wound at least and 3 wounds at maximum, which is pretty powerful with cards like John have. So you can definitely play healing army with John Commander, for example, which was very popular at the start of the Night's faction. And I think Ammon is still a very strong NCU for them.
Totally.
Go ahead.
Totally. Yeah, you're right. I just have, at this particular moment of the game, I have mixed feelings about Ammon. Initially, we didn't have a lot of choices with the Night's Watch, also NCU-wise.
Yep.
And back in the good old days of 1.4, he was, of course, a must-have, because it allows you to just, ramp up this healing up to 11, and as you said, in combination with John as well. But right now, after the Heroes Box 1 dropped, after a couple of changes happened to those NCUs as well, especially in 1.5.1, he got a lot of, other NCUs became almost better than him in a lot of different ways. Yep. Especially, for example, Corin, who is, undoubtedly, in my opinion, best NCU right now. And even NCUs like Donald have became, I don't want to say stronger than Ammon, but just more reliable. The thing about Ammon is, Ammon is extremely powerful in the late game, allowing you to heal up a lot of wounds. But in the early game, especially round 1 and 2, he is kind of okay-ish. Like, things that he does Craster kind of more efficient, allowing you to draw an additional card and stuff like that, and allowing you to replace zones that you don't care about. And I realized that if you combine both of them, they make a very cool team, giving you a lot of healing options. But most of the time, Craster turned out to be more than enough to sustain my craving for healing things in my list. So I still like Ammon. I'm just not using him as much as I did before.
Yep.
What's up with you, Brett?
I really like him.
still, but I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like I just mentioned, I think for me, Corrin has become my new aim, and it's just Corrin more often than not. He's not auto include, but in most of my lists, I'm just like, yeah, I gotta have the Corrin. But yeah, I mean, your point is valid where Ammon shows up bigger in the late game. I still like his versatility. When you've got some units that are down ranks, you can plop him onto the free attack, but you can still heal 3. So in that respect, he's more versatile than Craster, who's his own replacement, and he's just good for getting those heals anyway. But I don't rate Donald higher than Ammon. If I've got the choice between Donald and Ammon, I'm still going to take Ammon. Donald has just, it's probably just my luck. I can't think. Not allowing the vulnerable token is really, really nice. But for me, if it's like my Sworn brothers get charged and I play Donald, so I'm saving on 3s, either every dice that I successfully saved was a 4 or more, or it just doesn't make a bit of difference. So I think that's just my luck. I started counting them, and he just wasn't saving me enough wounds to really justify him. That's not to say that he's bad. He's probably really good for other people whose dice rolls are a little bit less extreme. But I very much still like Ammon. He's also a really good counter to Walder if they're going to try to bottom turn, top turn, and kill like Ghost, or in the case of your Watch Marshal. Ammon, as long as he's not on board, he's always able to just heal 1, so he can remove whatever wound Walder has done. So I like him there, but he's mostly been replaced in my lists with a Corrin and Craster combination. So in some lists, I've got Walder Frey or another NCU like Varys or somebody, and it's just kind of pushed Ammon out of them. I really hate it because Ammon is such a good, wholesome character as well, and he's so close with Jon, and I love Jon, so I kind of get sucked into that fluff a little bit by bringing Ammon with Jon. But in terms of we want to get out of the field and being the most competitive that I can be, a lot of times Ammon just finds himself out of the list. But definitely for newer players getting into the Night's Watch, he's probably worth bringing because he's going to give you a taste for that resiliency and the kind of zombie theme of the Night's Watch where they just don't and of course the Ammon bomb, I call it the Ammon bomb, is always a huge thing. Healing up 6 and removing an activation token, it's just so deflating for your opponent. I rate the psychology of this game really highly. Just like Yannick said with Corrin, if he's not on the board, you've got psychological control of your opponent. Ammon is the same way. If you plop Ammon down on a unit they've worked so hard to kill, and then boom, they're back up to health. In my game against George, I think a lot of people were watching that Masters game. George was ready to beat his head on the wall because he was taking the swords every round, and I was taking the bags every round with Ammon, and Ammon out-healed what his attacks could do. I didn't lose a single combat unit that whole entire game except for Ghost. Wow. And George was doing his best to kill me, and it was just... and with Ammon, you can split the heals too, right? So if you've got a unit down to 4 guys and you've got a unit that's at 6 guys, you can heal 3, and now you're up to 7 and 9, and it's like, yeah. Like, what are they going to do? They're just going to get angry. So it's very frustrating. It can be really hard once things are engaged to, without your bonus rerolls, to out-kill what Ammon can heal. So he's still got merit.
Yeah, and I think as an opponent, that's something you need to take into account, and so you need to plan when to strike, and so you only can attack the Night's Watch efficiently if he has activated Ammon, or the tactic board has all zones with an NCU. So in both cases, Ammon can't heal anymore, and then you can strike, and then you need to double tap a unit, either charge them with 2 units or has some ways to get additional attacks like Cunning Ploy with Therion, or maybe you have the first activation in the next round. All of these things, but you need to plan ahead when you can kill Night's Watch units as an opponent, and this also, like Rowan, makes your window where you have the opportunity to make plays much smaller, and this is also something which pressures you the Night's Watch opponent to fight against them. And you still can do it with Ammon up, but if you don't kill the unit, it's really bad for you, because most of the time you invest a lot of cards or abilities and so on, and this one attack to kill a unit, and if you aren't able to do so, it can be frustrating. But as an opponent, you need to look out for these windows where you have the ability to do so, and as a Night's Watch player, you need to do the opposite. Look out for these windows, but deny your opponent to get benefits out of striking at the right time.
Yeah, that's totally right. Just a general tip: if you're playing against Night's Watch, like, I hate to give tips how to beat Night's Watch, but never split your attacks. Like, focus down unit after unit in the Night's Watch, and you will probably have an easier time dealing with them.
Yeah, I think that's a general advice, to just kill one unit after another, but yeah, especially against Night's Watch, that's true.
Yeah.
And maybe against random Baratheons,
Yeah,
you also can
exactly.
heal a ton of wounds.
Yeah, like
in a short
splitting
amount of time.
attacks if they have like 3 Rose Knights is a general bad idea. I'm gonna have a bad time fighting those guys. They're just gonna win by doing nothing, like sitting just there. And...
Yeah, they heal. That's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just Rose Knights.
Yeah, but Night's Watch can do nearly the same without dealing wounds to the opponent.
Yeah, I just wished my veterans were as powerful as those Rose Knights. Like, come on, man, they're costing 7 points and like they're ridiculously strong. Like, yeah, a little bit faster, but
yeah.
I would trade a point of movement to heal when I pass a morale test.
Yeah, of course you would. Why not?
Yeah. Perfect. And I think if you are in a defensive team, maybe not a healing theme anymore, but in a more I deny you to deal wounds to me, it's Donanoy, who has 3 order tokens. And whenever a friendly unit is attacked after attack dice are rolled, you may remove 1 order token from Donal, and this unit gains +1 defense dice, and your opponent can't expend vulnerable tokens from this unit which got attacked. And he wants to do the same like Ammon does, but he prevents the damage instead of healing damage you got. So I think both Ammon and Donal have the same direction they are heading, but they do stuff a bit differently on when they work. And
yeah, totally. Like, if you combine those guys together, like, they make the dream team. Like, Donal is just denying damage, and even if damage gets through, Ammon is like healing it back up. And I even had once a list which also included Craster, like tripling down on this defensive healing thing, and it was ridiculous. Like, units wouldn't die, like they wouldn't just simply die. But I totally get what Brett said beforehand, that it depends on your dice rolls, of course. Donal can be extremely powerful, but he can be also a total waste of points. It happens. It's all a little bit of luck involved in your dice rolls, but in the end of the day, in my games, even denying the vulnerable tokens was most of the time very crucial, because if you think about it, vulnerable tokens are basically wounds that are lingering to be placed on your units. And when you deny your opponent to set off this vulnerable token to get it going, you are basically preventing wounds effectively. Like, you can't tell how much wounds you have prevented, but if you just count up the statistics, you should be getting a lot of value out of even this little portion of the effect. And I think Donald is also great against very mobile factions, against Starks, Free Folks, and even Targaryens, allowing you, a force that is not as mobile as them, to take a head-on charge and just strike back at them with full force. If you're lucky enough, you don't even lose a rank thanks to Donald. And the cool thing about Donald is, which is the reason I prefer him above Ammon, is you can use this ability after attack dice got rolled. You can just see how many hits are incoming, and then you can decide on that number if you want to use this token or not. So, for example, if someone is attacking with 8 dice without any rerolls and just getting 3 hits in, Donald is probably not worth it in this case. But if someone is charging in with a Lancecalf and getting in like I don't know, 12 hits or something like that, you should use Donald in this case. He's gonna prevent a lot of wounds. Yeah, again, it's all a little bit dice luck, but I like him. I really like him. Beforehand, in 1.4, he was garbage. Like, this was like the worst NCU I've ever seen. Like, I don't even know what they were thinking. But now he's in a very good spot, and he's also the reason I said, like, toolbox-wise, the aspect of this faction, the NCUs are great. They're great designed around this aspect. Like, you have Donald, you can take a fast look at him, you immediately see, yeah, this is the defensive option I have in my army toolkit.
Yep.
Go ahead, Brett.
I think the obvious combination with Donald that drew me into him to begin with, at the time I was running double Veterans of the Watch, is the counterattacks with Donald Noy. Because if you get charged by something that's got a vanilla attack, you can save on a 2+, and you can call counterattacks with Donald's token since it's not an order. The other thing with him is you can combine him with Shield of the Realms of Men. So he's really good at letting you get charged by like those Tully Cavaliers or those Alpha striking units. And so he can essentially cancel out their Sundering. But on top of that, he can go ahead and throw down the Shield of the Realms of Men as well. And you'll take little, maybe no damage from that Alpha charge. So in that respect, yes, he's very, very strong. I did use him in the TSL in my John list. There were a couple of times where just canceling the vulnerable token saved my Ranger trackers. They're not the most ideal unit for that order, but it can be used to keep them alive at least give them a chance. You know, if they're getting barraged by something, to not go down ranks and be able to still fight with their full effectiveness. So he's really good in that regard. And in my very first game, I had a unit of veterans, Night's Watch or Dothraki veterans, get over my lines, and he did a charging volley into my Sworn Brothers, but I double Donald Noyd, and the Sworn Brothers ended up only taking like 3 wounds. And then that set up a Watcher on the Wall, and I just flanked the Dothraki veterans and removed them from the game immediately. So he does have some merit, and he's definitely a strong choice. I think for me, the biggest things are his non-conflicting with some of the other triggers, non-conflicting with Shield of the Realms of Men, non-conflicting with counterattacks. So you're kind of able to stack those and get the most out of the defensive ability.
Yep. Totally. I'm just gonna disagree on one thing. In one of my games, my unit of trackers, with the help of Donald and the Shield of the Realm of Men, tanked 3 units at once. They didn't die in this game. This was the most amazing shit I've ever seen. Like, those trackers were like a wall. They refused to die and hold off 3 units at the same time in the middle of the field. And wow. From this point on, I was like, yeah, I love Donald. I'm just going to use him in every list. Didn't turn out in the end in such a way, but I think I still rate him very high. But I totally get your point as well. Like, I think Ammon is maybe a better option in defensive wise, but it also depends on the amount of dice that are incoming. So if someone is throwing a lot of dice at you, as I said, with, I don't know, 12 hits or something like that, then I think Donald is probably better than Ammon in the long run. But yeah.
I think Ammon has more of a panic button effect. So if there's a unit low, you can just smash Ammon onto the tactics board and can heal them up, which on Donald, I think you need to be a bit more smarter, I would say, to know which unit can do which damage on your opponent, and then you need to look at, which attack do I need to prevent or which I don't, and so on. So I think Donald needs a bit more of game experience to play him right. Compared to Ammon, who's, I think, more beginner friendly NCU because he just works. And but yeah, I personally did a few times where I played Night's Watch. I was in love with him. Especially because I'm not able to play with Growan because I'm too bad at Night's Watch to play him. So I think Donald is somewhere in the middle from the skill cap, and I think that's perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I think we touched nearly every NCU now. I think the only NCU we didn't talk about was Bone Marsh, and he's the other NCU which comes besides Ammon in the starter box. So I think he's worth mentioning here. Bone Marsh has the ability that when he claims his zone on the tactics board, you may look at the top 2 cards of your tactics deck and place one in your hand and one under the deck. So he's just there for cycling cards. And he was 3 points at the beginning, but he was changed to 4 points because he was used quite often. So with 4 points, how do you guys use him? Brett?
So, in a Jon Snow list, I think it's really important to be able to get a hold of your Jon cards. Particularly, It Shall Not End Until My Death is a really big one. You kind of need to have that one in your hand because it gives you basically a second chance, or else it is good for allowing you to tie up a really scary unit with Ghost. Because he can just get in there, and if you can keep him alive, you can tie him up for sometimes 2 or 3 rounds, depending. So it's pretty important. But other than that, I mean, he just helps you get your cards, which is really important. A lot of times, I'm on the fence with him because at 3 points, he was really good. But I think at the time when they made the change, Night's Watch was kind of receiving the same level of hatred that Starks get right now, which is just everybody wanted to complain about Night's Watch. But Bowen Marsh has like serious downside to him that I think people kind of overlook because, say, for example, you pull a Shield of the Realms of Men and It Shall Not End Until My Death. You don't have either one of them in your hand at the time. You've got to put one of them to the bottom of the deck, and it might be round 5, round 6 before you get it back. Or let's say you pull double Horn That Wakes the Sleepers, or Horn That Wakes the Sleepers and Watcher on the Wall. Like, it's weird because every tactics deck you can say, like, well, these cards are really good, and oh, this army needs their cards or they really fall flat. But I think in particular, Targaryens and Night's Watch are the 2 factions that just need their cards a lot more than the others. Like for Starks, they can function without their cards. Their cards just open up combos. Lannisters can function without their cards. It just allows them to play that deniability game a little bit stronger. But Night's Watch and Targaryens, they like need those cards. They need the cards at the right time. If you don't ever get a Watcher on the Wall to kind of set up that's their one trick. Like that's their one trick play. And if you're denied that card until way later in the game when everybody's engaged, it's not doing you a whole lot of good. So Bowen is good for that. But I think the problem is at 4 points, he's competing with the other NCUs that we've mentioned. He's still very, very good. I just ran him in the TSL in my John list, there were many games I was really happy that I had him. But I think from moving forward, it's just he kind of fills like that specialty role in the NCU faction. So you've got like a healing NCU, which you choose between, or a defensive, I guess, NCU. So you're choosing between like Ammon and Donald Noy. You want to have half hand for the offensive potential, but also for the sacrifice ability. So then it comes down to like Bowen Marsh, Varys, Walder Frey, Craster, just because he's cheaper. And I think a lot of times because Craster can get you through those first couple of rounds and get you the card, he's going to get the nod over Bowen Marsh a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree on the most parts. Bowen for me is just like Ammon right now. I'm kind of conflicted about him. I still love him. He is probably still my favorite NCU in the Night's Watch arsenal, but competitively seen, there are better options. But I still love to field him and to play with him. The reason for that is quite simple. Where Brett lacks the luck in dice, I lack luck in my card draw. I'm drawing, my first hand always includes take the black or now as watches ended. Like my last game, no joke, 2 take the black, 1 now as watches ended. I was screwed over from the beginning. And in these cases, I'm always like, man, I wish I had Bowen right now. Because this guy allows me to basically cycle through my deck very fast, allow me to get those cards I need very fast on my hand. But Brett made a very, very valid point here that sometimes when you use his ability, you draw 2 fantastic cards, and then you need to put 1 down under your deck, which hurts a lot. I would recommend him only in a auto list, or if you are fielding Craster as well, which is a hard thing to do, because those both NCUs allow you to reshuffle your deck and basically mitigate this weakness of Bowen. And you can basically double down on the card draw aspect of the Night's Watch. And as Brett said, it's totally true. I think Night's Watch, more than any faction out there, is completely reliant on their cards, especially if you consider the vow mechanic, which is like everything they're balanced around. Like you need those vows, you need them in your hand, you need to get them onto your units, and if you don't have them in your hand, you're basically screwed over. And I rate Bowen very high. I wish you would be still at 3 points, maybe not with the exact same ability. But if I glance over to the Baratheons and their Eldon Estamont, I'm like, yeah, I don't really get why he's 4 points now, because maybe Eldon is kind of broken as well for his points. I think that's fair to assume, but I felt a little bit betrayed when I saw Eldon Estamont. I was like, this guy is at 3 points, but Bowen is getting like ranked up to 4. It's kind of weird. I still love him. I still think he's awesome. He mitigates my card draw bad luck thingy, so I rate him very high. But to be totally honest, competitively wise, if you want to build a successful list, you probably don't need Bowen that much. There are better options or better alternatives. And I would make the argument that he is very good in a Alistair list, just because of seeing their flaws, which you can just recycle constantly into your hand, which is a very fun and dynamic, cool little gimmick. And it allows you to basically play cards even when your deck is basically empty. You still have this 1 card that you can just recycle over and over again, which is easier to do than you might expect, because Night's Watch can dish out a lot of cards in a lot of different ways and very fast. In most of my games at the round of 3 or 4, I was through my deck. I went through my entire deck and played everything, or have it in my hand. And I think Bowen is great for 4 points, but not as great as he used to be. A lot of people said that he was kind of overpowered. I get that. Yeah, he was kind of strong. He was kind of strong, no doubt. But I wish it just would have tuned him down to his 3-point cost instead of increasing it to 4.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. But but like you said, he's still valid in some list builds, and
Totally.
I think that's great. That you still can play him, and I think the NCU choices in the Night's Watch in general are very competitive against each other, and also if you compare them to other NCUs. And I think the NCU choices is a really shining star in the Night's Watch faction, which is something where other factions don't have that much options and that much competitive options, which is pretty cool. Going ahead, we only have the attachments left. Of course, there are a lot of attachments. We only get over a few here, which we find pretty interesting. Two of them are from the upcoming attachment box. The first one would be the Marshal attachment. He costs 2 points and is a cavalry attachment, the first one for the Night's Watch. And he get unbreakable walls, so this unit can attach 2 walls instead of 1. And also he has the order quickfire, where the unit can make a ranged attack after they make a maneuver or a retreat action, which is always the case when you play with a not engaged cavalry unit, because they have a free maneuver. So there are definitely synergies in there. Also, as players who definitely like the Ranger trackers, what do you guys think of this Marshal? Is he worth the points, or is he just too expensive to be fielded in your armies?
Go ahead, Brett.
Oh, I think he's insanely crazy good. It's not just the quickfire. The doubling up on vows is pretty substantial. If he had the watch captain's ability to control a ground or control a vow zone for the turn, he would be on the verge of just being completely busted. But with that said, he is so versatile for a number of reasons. So obviously the first most obvious option is he's going to set up his own vulnerable token. You can move up into range, take a free shot, follow that up immediately with a second shot. That's 14 shots going into the same target potentially. Mix in some awful cards. It could get pretty out of hand really quickly. That's just a ton of attacks. If you double Mighty Enhancement that, I think you can reliably expect 18, 19, 20 hits, somewhere in that range. From hitting on 3s with rerolls, that many attack dice, you're going to roll some 6s. Additionally, I think one thing that a lot of people will not catch at first is the Watcher on the Wall vow. So you don't have to feel too badly about leaving the Watcher on the Wall on this unit, because you can still put a second vow on them. So with the Watcher on the Wall, you can charge them in, as I had already mentioned, to kind of tie a unit up. Then you can use the Watcher to make a free retreat. Well, you can retreat potentially over to the flank and take a shot from the free retreat, and then you've still got a maneuver and another shot coming. So you don't even have to take the shot from the free retreat. You can retreat from a unit, disengage from them, maneuver back into their flank, take a free shot, and then maybe shift again, potentially getting them in the rear this time, and take a free shot. Alternatively, you've got the options to shoot 2 different targets. So you can shoot one target with one volley, shoot another target with the next volley. Or finally, you can create your own little miniature bastards girls, because again, they're not horrible when they charge, but also when you consider the Sword in the Darkness, they could take those 7 shots, charge in, and then attach the Sword in the Darkness in conjunction with the Watcher, and now maybe they've got 8 attacks hitting on 4s. That's just a lot of dice, and it's a lot of versatility for those 8 points. So do I think that he's too expensive to be fielded? No. I think that unit is worth squeezing some room into your list to make that work. It's totally worth it, because it's
so much damage, and at this point, it kind of, in my opinion, and maybe Ilya will feel differently, but in my opinion, this 8-point combination once again pushes Ranger Hunters out, because while Ranger Hunters are good and can be devastating,
I don't disagree in any point.
Yeah,
you're totally right. You're totally right.
They're just faster. They kind of fill the same role, but they're faster. They've got the free vulnerable token, and I think they're just a little bit more versatile than even the Ranger Hunters. I think it's going to be really good, and I think it's going to give people a lot of headaches, and I don't think it's going to be long before Night's Watch is back in the driver's seat. I think they'll make their way into top 3, but fighting for a top 1 or 2 spot with Free Folk and Starks, because I think with some of the other tools that we already mentioned here, and now adding another way to fan out activations and just this one really nasty unit, I think that they've caught up as a result of this new stuff. I'm pretty excited. And I was officially back on the bandwagon before this stuff came out, so nobody can call me nobody can call me a bandwagon jumper, because I played them in the CSL without the Watch Marshal or the Senior Builder.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in every aspect. You're totally right. The thing about the Watch Marshal, his attachment, he makes Ranger Hunters complete obsolete right now. Like, there is almost no good reason why you should choose Hunters over this combination of attachment and unit, because this unit does exactly the same thing, but just better and more reliable. You're having more maneuvers, you are more flexible, you even get to attach 2 vows to this unit. Like, it's kind of heartbreaking that this cool looking unit like the Hunters is so, like, I don't want to say trash, but it's just not worth the points. It's just doesn't make any sense anymore to field them, which is very, very sad. But at the same time, this tracker unit became my favorite unit in the entire game because it's so fun to play. You have a lot of options with them. Like Brad mentioned, you can pull off such crazy movement shenanigans. Like, they're basically cheaper Dothraki veterans. You can make an argument for that, and I totally agree with that as well. Some of my buddies said that, who is also playing Targaryens, and he said, you're basically fielding right now Dothraki Targaryens for 2 points cheaper. I said, yeah, kind of. You're kind of not wrong there. And the fact that you can attach 2 vows to them leads to some incredible plays. Like, I love Fire That Burns Against the Cold on this unit. And you can basically, at the start of a round, make something vulnerable with a marked target. Then you can make something panic with Fire That Burns right into the flank of the enemy, and then constantly just shoot at them, just lay down this barrage of arrows and attacks. And I managed to not one shot, but basically combo a unit of Rose Knights to death with this unit. Like, they didn't stand a chance. Like, this was ridiculous. And the reason I love this unit as well is this is exactly what I'm expecting from a elite unit. Like, this felt elite in every aspect, in every regard. Like, I was capable of doing a lot of very cool tricks, attaching multiple vows to this unit, then recycle them, performing some cool movement shenanigans with the shift from the ranged attacks and stuff like that. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about an elite unit. Like, this should be like a staple for everything else in the Night's Watch. And I really hope they change the other units, maybe especially the Ranger Hunters, so that they work in a similar way. And yeah, I think the Watch Marshal attachment is probably one of the coolest attachments out there. And the smart thing they also did with this attachment is it gives quickfire and 2 vows, so you can't attach it to a neutral cavalry. So you don't have to feel like being getting a combination that is kind of broken or overpowered. And if I'm looking over to Starks and their Krennic Man Survivalist and the Dervishes, I'm like, oh boy, like, why is this even possible? And with this attachment, stuff like that won't happen. So I think he's awesome. He's great in every regard, and people should try him out. It's maybe kind of hard to fit him in sometimes because he's at 2 points, but most of the time you should get you should have some leftover points that you can invest into this, and you won't regret it.
Yeah, that's. I think getting the points is the most difficult part on it. But yeah, I think he's great, and the only way where it is effective to just play against him is to just charge the unit, I guess. But if the unit has the Watcher, it gets a bit more difficult to get them into combat, and even then they can just retreat with their activation, and yeah, it's like a unit you can get hold on because they're so mobile. They can retreat, shoot, deal damage.
Yeah.
I think they are amazing, but you still have to take into account that the ranger trackers aren't the sturdiest units, so they can die on a hard hitting attack, and that's something you need to look out for.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point that they're very hard to use. So maybe it's not the most beginner friendly unit out there, but if you get the hang of trackers in general without the attachment, then you can try to tiptoe into this attachment, and you probably will get a lot of great results out of them. Also, one thing I would like to mention about this is Night's Watch doesn't have an elite cavalry in such a sense that we don't have lance cavalry, for example, like the Knights of Castle Rock and Tallycav. This is basically our equivalent to that. So it's harder to use, but it can deal as much damage as those units. And I think they did a great job with this attachment, designing it in this way.
Yeah, and I think with the trackers in general, but also the trackers with the Watch Marshal, you need to master your positioning. So you need to be out of line of sight of your opponent and stuff like this, and also getting the unit activated at the right time. And I think that's some game mechanics which are generally helpful to get better results out of your game. But I think with units like the Watch Marshal in the Ranger trackers, it's even more important than with other armies and other combos. Right. And after that, we have a second new attachment in the attachment box. Okay, we have a third, but we won't talk about the third today. The next one is the senior builder. He has an ability which is stake building. You can place one stake per terrain piece with dangerous, indestructible, and hindering within 2 inches of this unit, and this terrain piece cannot be placed over a unit or another terrain piece. But the senior builder costs 1 point, and okay, his ability must be used at the start of any round. But placing terrain is a quite new mechanic. I think, yeah, it's the first one. Besides in Feast for Crows, where you place the corpse bites, but that you can just get a terrain piece for 1 point on one of your units. It's quite interesting, and I think also could be strong if you use it right. What's your take on him?
Yeah, so senior builder or senior builder, whatever you want to call him right now, because this meme will prevail for a very long time, I guess. Especially thanks to Carlo and his troll list. Yeah, I want to call it troll list because it's quite successful, which is still mind-boggling to me. But in the end, Carlo showed very well that if you spam this guy in combination with conscripts, you can build like literally a wall. Like you are the Night's Watch and you're building a wall on the battlefield, and the enemy has to get through it in some way. So if the enemy is dedicated to killing your conscripts, you can use the senior builder to basically build stakes in front of them, or in such a way that whatever the enemy does, he has to pivot over them and always gets those wounds in, which is extremely strong against very resilient units, against cavalry. And the enemy either has to ignore those stakes by trying to avoid them, or by destroying them, which wastes actions. And the Zenio Builder in this way, I think, is one of the strongest one-point attachments out there, but he's extremely hard to use. So you really have to know when to place down those stakes and how you want to place down those stakes, because stakes can also damage you as well. So you always have to keep that in mind and plan ahead. But if you combine them with a great ranged support of units, like, for example, Crossbowman or even maybe the Scorpion, you can get a lot of very great results out of this guy. I think at one point he is amazingly good. I'm not an overall fan of this playstyle, but I can deny that he's extremely powerful, extremely strong. And I think people who are playing Night's Watch and are very creative in list building can make up one of the coolest lists with this guy and then make some very interesting plays. Like I remember one game where I placed stakes down in such a way that Gregor, the Zolo variant, was just surrounded by those things. And whatever he did, he always received wounds. So it was kind of, it's also one of the trolliest attachments out there. Like it's very creative, very dynamic, very cool. It's as you said, it's an ability we never have seen before like that in this game. And yeah, I think he's great for one point.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Brett?
Oh, this guy. I think well, I mean, again, this man Carlo, I mean, he demonstrated the capability of the list, but it's really smart because he brought it with the Scorpion. So the Scorpion is kind of not as bad as the Stone Thrower as far as being, stuck in a spot. But with the Stone Thrower in mind, if you think about it, let's say if you're playing against Starks, you're kind of scared of a dire wolf getting behind your lines because they're so small. But if you put that Stone Thrower over in a corner and you have your little homie Conscripts just throw a stake in front of it really quick before they move up the field, they can make it to where the dire wolf has to charge it in the front. And if it does, it's going to run over the stakes and die. So then at that point, the dire wolf can't even get to the Stone Thrower to do anything about it. The dire wolf can't do one single thing about that. But
don't
also,
give people ideas, Brett. We don't want to see
know.
more stone throwers, man. it's a bad idea.
But that's what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah,
a little clinic. I will be very mad if I play against that, but I mean, it would work because they couldn't charge it. So that takes one of the biggest threats to the Stone Thrower away, because now you can just punish their units that they've paid a lot of points just to kind of bring those dogs, and you can kind of kill the parent unit, and then they'll have dogs left. Like, what are they going to do? They're not meant to take whole armies. But it's interesting because with the Scorpion as well, you can get your Scorpion up to a spot where you want it, to where it's in the center, covering most of the field, and then you throw stakes in front of it. And even in watching TSL games, it's not just the damage from the stakes. There's something that I see people forget all of the time. I see it forgotten a lot, almost 50% of the time. The stakes, when you charge over stakes, they're hindering. So you have to roll 2 dice and take the lowest. So not only is it hurting you really badly, but you've got a pretty good chance to be disordered as well. So that's like another kind of built-in defense mechanism for them. It's like, I'm finally going to get to this Scorpion that's been picking me apart, but I'm going to be damaged and disordered. This really sucks. But you've almost got a dedicated unit to go up there and bust those stakes and kind of waste their round to make room for you to do a move. So yeah, it's a really trolly, really strong attachment. I think if you've got the extra point, you should make him a part of your lists.
Yeah, and then it's especially the Senior Builder also gives a new modification for the Scorpion, which is
so good.
the Overwatch modification. So Overwatch is a new ability which lets your Scorpion do a free attack action against a unit that moves within 12 inches of him. So you can just fire into the unit that moved into range, and it's just a free attack, and it's also zone denial. Yeah, and I think that's really powerful, because 12 inches doesn't sound that much at first, but it's a huge area. If you place the Scorpion right, it's nearly half of the battlefield, which can be covered from one Scorpion. So you don't want to go close to him because you get shot at, but most often you need to get to him, get into range, because there are objectives or something like this, and you can't let the Night's Watch player have all of them. So you get into a lose-lose situation. Okay, there are ways to get around this, but it gets pretty hard to push to decide where the Scorpion stands, and also if you have a few senior builders to just put stakes down. It's just it's just like a castle. It's literally a castle, because if you want to get onto the walls of the castle, you take damage while you're approaching it. You get shot at while you're approaching it, and to be honest, I don't have that much ideas how to play against such a castle, other than just trying to push to the other side of the battlefield. But even then, you can have conscripts with the senior builder, which is just a 5-point unit, which can cover so much space with the unit tray and the stakes. So yeah, you can fortify a certain position, and your opponent has a really hard time to get through it. Of course, there are ways to get around it, but yeah, you make it pretty hard for your opponent. But yeah, that's that is a problem, but you're pretty immobile, and that's, I think, the biggest weakness of such a list. And also stakes in general, because if you put it down, it also will hurt you if you want to go through it. And that's something you need to take into account if you're playing the senior builder.
Yeah. This mod is the only reason I'm gonna dust off my Scorpion, because it's just sitting there on my shelf like for over a year now, and maybe I'm gonna play it again. I still think that the Scorpion is kind of meh in a lot of different ways, but this modification actually is extremely good. Like I really consider playing Scorpions again, but it depends. Like if you still take into account that if you include the Scorpion, if you include Senior Builder, if you include the modification, you're already at 9 points, which means that you are basically having this elite setup of different things, and you are dedicating your list so that these things actually work out in your favor. So you're building everything around those little around those units and around those attachments. And I don't know if I really want to do that. Like Carlos showed us that he basically dedicated this entire list to conscripts, senior builders, and ranged support. And as you said, it's a very static list. It's a very straightforward list. It's maybe not even the most complicated list to play, but it's very strong. Like those insignificant conscripts building this wall, yeah, they are kind of annoying. I don't want to say too powerful in this combination, but they are extremely, extremely annoying. And I even thought about including storm crows with this guy, just, getting even better infantry out there. Yeah, I can attach vows to them, but who cares? They're just there to soak up damage.
But you aren't significant anymore.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. that's totally true. So I totally get why conscripts in combination with this guy are the thing to go. But as I said, yeah, I don't know if I really want to build a list dedicated to this play style, because in a 2-list format, you're not very flexible with such a list. But in some specific matchups, I can imagine that this is extremely strong, like extremely, extremely strong. Like if you manage to get, for example, onto objectives before your enemy does, and you are building your fortifications, I don't see him getting those objectives back that fast. Like this can be extremely strong in modes like Dance with Dragons, maybe even Game of Thrones, or in the newest mode, Haunt and Ready, where you can now area denial, use your area of denial to just constantly barrage an objective with your Scorpion.
Yeah. So yeah, so two quite interesting new options in the upcoming attachment box. And the next attachment we want to talk about, and I think it's the last attachment for today, it's Jon Snow, the Lord Snow attachment. So it's not the Commander version, it's the version for 3 points. It comes with boldness and courage, where your unit always counts as having 1 additional rank when attacking, and also gets +2 attack dice if they are at full rank. And it also has the bond Ghost, which lets Ghost activate before or after Jon's unit takes its action in its activation. So yeah, it's not only the attachment, but it's also Ghost. Which Ghost is also just a free direwolf. He costs 0 points. And also he has this the Silent Predator ability, which says when this attack is selected, enemies may not play tactics card for the rest of the turn, which also has combo potential with the Bond ability of Jon. So even if he's pretty expensive, 3 points, I think it's the most expensive attachment we talked about, and I think it's the most expensive attachment in the Night's Watch faction. He still has some potential in some lists, and I know, Ilya, that you run him a lot at some point.
Yeah.
And you said to me that maybe he's interesting again with the new Marshall solo model. So yeah, what's your take on him?
Well, yeah, Jon Lord Snow. I love and hate him at the same time. The reason I love him is because of Ghost. I think Ghost is the most underrated wolf out there. People tend to disregard his Silent Predator very fast. And yes, he got nerfed quite hard. The glorious days of 1.4, when you can attach Sword in the Darkness to him and just dish out 4 auto wounds, are over. And I totally understand why this happened, because attaching vows to that wolf was kind of busted, especially with the shields. Yeah, especially with the shields of the Realm of Men, because it couldn't. You just basically could chuck in Ghost into a unit of Knights of Castle Rock, and they couldn't do anything again about it. Like, they just really need to be very lucky on their dice rolls to get rid of Ghost. And if you're playing Jon, you just play it shall not end until my death, and he's still there. Like, was the most annoying thing ever back then. And yeah, he dealt auto wounds back then, and now they removed everything but just except for Silent Predator. But I still think that Jon, he's maybe not as good as he was back then, but Silent Predator is now more a dedicated choice in specific matchups. If you're fighting against defensive armies, if you're fighting against Baratheons, Lannisters, even other Night's Watch, mirror matches, Ghost has a lot of value. Ghost can basically deny the enemy a lot of very crucial card plays. And therefore, I think that Ghost in combination with Jon for 3 points is still a valid option. I wouldn't say he is the best option any longer. Before, he was quite, I don't want to say auto-include, but almost. But now he's more like you have this option, you can take it if you want to, but you don't have to if you want to be successful. And I think he is in a good spot. If I would make a change about this attachment, I would give Ghost maybe his auto wounds back. I think it's not that much to ask for, considering that he's a very expensive attachment in a very expensive army already. So if you are attaching Jon to a unit of Swarm Brothers, you have a 10-point unit on the table, which is not very sturdy and can get evaporated very fast by enemy alpha strikes. And the reason I hate also John is because I constantly keep on rolling once when I charge with him, like constantly. It's mind-boggling, and it's like a curse. Like I got even other people to play this combination of unit and attachment, and they also rolled once on their charges. So I think this attachment is kind of haunted.
I know for sure that your games with Night's Watch are.
Dude,
but...
in one game, 3 once in a row. 3 once. And I needed a 2 to get into combat. I didn't manage to get him even in. Like, this was the most... Like, I was about to quit Night's Watch that day. I was about, like, screw that. Not gonna ever play you again, John. But, yeah. I got it on camera, man. This was ridiculous.
What was it, the game against Ben?
No, it was against Tom. Like I seriously 2 times in a row I needed a 2 to get into combat. Roll a 1. And just stood. Oh Jesus! It just brings back like painful memories. Brett, go on.
I'm sorry. We're laughing with you, Ilya. We're laughing.
Yeah. I know.
No, I think Lord Snow, I really wish when they had adjusted the Stark children. Unfortunately, at the time, Ghost was still the powerhouse that he is. So I think that had a lot to do with their choice not to bump John down to 2 points. I think if Ghost had been the version that we have now, Lord Snow would be 2 points, and he would be really popular. The problem that I still think he's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's mostly just for that activation. Because if you think about it, with Lord Snow, you're paying mostly 3 points for 2 extra attacks in whatever unit Lord Snow is in. Because he's normally going to be in Veterans, or very rarely in Veterans. Mostly in Sworn Brothers, let's be real. In Sworn Brothers, maybe Veterans, maybe Ranger Hunters. Sworn Brothers give you 2 extra attacks at every rank. Veterans give you +2, +1, +1. Ranger Hunters +2, +1, +1. That's pretty bad compared to Bran and Hodor at 2 points, which I know you're not supposed to compare faction to faction, but it's reality. Bran and Hodor reliably do more damage, plus they have the built-in defensive mechanism, and plus, at this point, Summer is better at dealing damage than Ghost. I won't say he's better than Ghost, because I'm going to kind of add on to the point that you're making. Silent Predator is very good, particularly considering the rise of Baratheons, where a lot of times you have to be really afraid to attack a Baratheon unit. If they control the crown and you want to kill them, Last Stand can potentially wipe out or do heavy damage to your Sworn Brothers. That's where Ghost is going to come in really big with Bond, particularly if John is in Sworn Brothers. So I'm going to tell another one of my little tricks, which this is kind of a trick of the trade. I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway. If you've got Ghost, you don't even necessarily have to put Ghost into danger to be able to take advantage of Bond. Let's say you want to go kill a Baratheon baddie unit, but you don't want to get attacked back. Just take Ghost and attack. Use Bond and go with Ghost first and attack a piece of terrain. Yeah, because it's a melee attack. So now they can't play cards.
Yep, it's one of the most cheesiest way to get this effect going. Yeah, I know that
one. Always this power gamers. Yeah. Okay, I would do the same, but it's
sneaking up on those palisades. Yeah, I got you.
Yep. Ghost is stalking a palisade, and now
it's like the bone you feed your dog.
Yeah,
and he's happy, but everybody else is just watching and can't do anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
but it's just one of those moments when you do it to somebody in like a tournament game and they haven't had it done to them before, and like you don't necessarily explain what you're doing, but it's like, okay, I'm going to move Ghost up and break this palisade. Now I'm going to activate John and attack, and they're like, okay, well I have a card. Yeah, but you can't. What? You destroy terrain with a melee attack, so I destroyed the terrain with Silent Predator, so you don't get to play cards. Like, what just happened? That's really rude. But he's got merit, but I mean, even for just the activation. So it's a way to get that 8th activation in the Alistair list.
And I think Lord Snow in a unit of Sworn Brothers in an Alistair list is going to feast. He's going to feast because of Alistair's nasty cards. Playing Ruthless Approach, grabbing the money bags and taking their defense down by 1, and then having those 10 attacks from Lord Snow. There's not very many things that are going to survive that. And, well, I guess, spoiler, I don't know which one's dropping first, but my Alistair article kind of covers some of these things. But his cards synergize so well with each other, too. Like Ruthless Approach, knocking 2 off of their morale and 1 for their defense. But at the same time, you've got seeing their flaws, making them panicked and vulnerable. I have charged into Rose Knights with Sworn Brothers in the front. Sworn Brothers with Lord Snow in the front of Rose Knights. And because of Ruthless Approach and seeing their flaws, they just red misted. They were gone. They didn't stand one single chance. 10 attacks. I think I hit 12 or 13 times. 5 ups with vulnerable, and then the panic token at a -2, they're just dead. Math says that they should die, so it's crazy. But it's interesting. So I think he's got some value. He's pretty good in an author list, too, because actually Ghost can shut off the cards, obviously, but he can kind of become a killer again with some of Othel's cards. You can give him Sundering. It'll help him to be able to take out a Stark Dire Wolf and block the North Remembers. If you've got him going into the flank or into the rear, you can give him Vicious, and then he gets a Weaken token to help him survive a little bit better. So he's not bad in those combinations. There's just not a whole lot of lists where I can warrant Lord Snow, but there's also, for me, there's really only 4 Night's Watch commanders that I really rate as being strong right now, and that's Alistair, Jon Snow, Othel, and Jor. And I don't think you want to put Lord Snow in a Jor list either. I think he's good with an Alistair list to ramp up Jon, and he's good in an Othel list because Othel's cards can take Ghost back up to his old potential.
Yeah, that's true. Nice. I also want to make the argument when you use Donald in combination with Ghost, he can become like incredibly tanky. Like a Wolf on a 2+ defense is quite annoying to deal with, especially if you have Auto Commander and this Vicious card with the Weaken token. You can just use him to block enemy cavalry very effectively with that combination.
Yes, I did this to Yannick in one event. I tied up his Tully Calf for the whole game. I don't think he was impressed.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, that happens if you don't talk about this. Okay, but we are talking about commanders, and like Brett said, we picked 4 commanders, exactly the ones Brett just mentioned, and I think if you are aware by John, we can just start with John as a commander, and yeah. I think both of you played John a lot when he came out with the starter box, and I knew from Brett that he's playing him a lot lately. So Brett, what's your take on John Commander and which playstyle do you prefer with him?
So in the TSL, I went with a pretty standard kind of elite John list. Yeah. And then Bob from Ohio ran a very similar list, but he took crossbows instead of the second unit of Sworn Brothers. But essentially, it's John in a unit of veterans, just for, the tankiness. I think everybody's familiar with what Jon Snow veterans do. And then 2 Sworn Brothers, a unit of trackers. And then I did Bowen Marsh, Donald Noy, and Ammon for that list. So I was going for the Sworn Brothers to be as defensive as the veterans to take that alpha charge, and then looking for John's cards to kind of help keep everything alive and just win those grinds. Now what I've done is I've gone in and kind of reimagined and reinvented that list. So what I'm currently running now, and this is what I'm running to the Gamers Haven event in Ohio, it's going to be Jon Snow in a unit of Sworn Brothers. For 2 reasons. His healing does help to keep them alive a good bit, but it's really good with Bond because Sworn Brothers are good at killing, much better than veterans. So I can really take advantage of Bond to stop tactics cards. And then it's a regular unit of Sworn Brothers, a unit of Ranger Trackers, and I've just literally removed the veterans and replaced them with 2 conscripts. And then I've gone with an NCU combination of Walder Frey, Corrin Halfhand, and Craster. Reasons that we listed are why I went with Craster over Bowen Marsh or Ammon. And I think just plucking Walder Frey into that list is a good choice, because this list is designed to fight especially Free Folk and Starks. So Walder's very strong against dire wolves, and Walder's very strong against raiders and trappers, because you can plop Walder onto the free attack on your first turn, make them worth a victory point, and then kill them. So because of that, that's the list that I've been running. It seems like a pretty strong list so far, but I haven't had the unfortunate luck of conscripts getting one-shotted yet. And I know that at some point that's going to happen. So hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen. And then I'm going to be really mad that I didn't bring veterans.
But at least you get the 1 activation more.
Yep. And usually if you can control the tempo with those, because that's a 9 activation list, which that's really good for Night's Watch. So if you can get the activation control that you need, that can be a big deal. And then, as we mentioned with the solo, once that's kind of out and ready for tournaments, I'll just drop a conscript, add the Watch Marshal as a solo, and then I'll take that 1 point and probably add El Senor Builder to the conscripts and round that list out that way.
Yeah. Sounds pretty good. So, Ilya, do you want to go ahead?
So back then, 1.4, we didn't have much choices, right? Everyone who played Night's Watch basically needed to play John, because Jero was just trash. Like, it was extremely, extremely bad. And I played a lot of John. Like, I played so much John, I don't even want to touch him ever again. But I still play him sometimes because I just want to refresh my take on him. And he's still probably best commander. I don't want to say best, but maybe he's the best commander actually for the Night's Watch because of his cards. They give the army a lot of survivability, a lot of flexibility. Like, Photo Watch is a very strong card. It's very flexible. You can enhance the offensive capabilities of your Swarm Brothers by making them +1 to hit. You can remove weakened tokens, heal them up, or giving him this crucial +2 speed for some devastating alpha charges, especially now with the Watch Marshal solo. And I played a John list recently just for the trolls. Like, I don't build competitive John lists any longer because I just know how strong he actually is, and he's not my shtick. He's quite and simple, and I don't like the fact that he's very reliant on a lot of morale tests, which is, as we said in the beginning of the podcast, a bane to Night's Watch. Like, it can go very fast south if you just fail one of those crucial panic checks, especially It Shall Not End Until My Death. But I totally know that John is very strong. If you place down Werewood Trees, you should be fine most of the time. He's very straightforward to play, but has a lot of very cool little tricks as well. Like Brett mentioned, the ghost charging tactic to trigger Stand United Brothers is one of those little tricks that you can pull off with him. It's very cool. He's very strong. And the list I played, this was a list I built before the attachment box, was a unit of Swarm Brothers with John, 2 units of Swarm Brothers with a Watch Recruiter, Ranger Trackers, Ammon, Donald, and Craster. So you can already tell it's very memey, it's very trolly. So you basically have everything going into healing. Craster to heal and to draw a card, Ammon to heal, John as a commander to heal, and those Watch Recruiters actually worked out very well, surprisingly well in Swarm Brothers, making them more tankier than I expected them to be. It's a list I wouldn't recommend playing against something that is very, very aggressive. It's more like a attrition list. And you can, I even played this once against Free Folk. Worked out quite well, surprisingly. And I think that John is a very good commander, but I personally don't play him just that much anymore because, as I said, he's just not my stick anymore. Like,
Yeah. Can understand it.
Yeah.
The amount of John games we played
Yeah.
at the beginning of the game, it was just ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. But also because the other commander of the starter box wasn't that the best choice, I would say.
Yeah, he was quite bad back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think now JR, which is also another commander on our list, got better with change to his attachments. And like Brett said, JR is also a commander that is on a list of commanders which are competitive, and
Yep.
I don't have much experience with them, but JR is a commander which plays heavily around morale tests, which is something which mitigates the fact that panic and panic mechanics have a high impact, a negative impact on the Night's Watch faction, and I think that's kind of the concept, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
Sure, Brett, start. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's totally fine.
I think besides just being panic focused, like anti-panic, I actually ran a Jor list, and I ran it in person, and I actually want to circle back around to it eventually and mess around with it a little bit more because I think it has a crap ton of potential. I think it's really good. It's not just the panic cards. I think his cards end up being better than what you think, to be honest. Obviously, the panic card, everybody knows it's pretty much a guaranteed panic pass, because even if you roll the 3 dice and throw out your lowest and fail that one, you can just attach it and then immediately discard it to pass that panic test. So that's pretty substantial in a lot of scenarios and against a lot of opponents that are just banking on that panic damage to do the work for them. But besides that, Jor, his unit is just a monster. It's just so ridiculous. It's like Kingsguard level of just how good this unit is. When I was playing him, I had his card in hand to go pull a vow and attach it. And then I had already had the Watcher on the wall attached to him. So I just went and pulled the Fire that Burns Against the Cold and threw out a vulnerable token. And I had Corrin on him as well. And then so that unit is movement 7 with it's got 9 attack dice with the half hand attached. So I made the charge, and well, when I activated, I used the Fire that Burns Against the Cold just to make them vulnerable. And then as soon as I got into combat, I threw Fire that Burns Against Cold out and attached the Sword in the Darkness. And that unit just blended a whole army, basically all on its own. Just Jor and the Sworn Brothers just massacred this army. And it was really big being able to pull that card out of my hand and kind of complete that 3-piece combo whenever I wanted to. Like, I knew that I had that ability because of Jor's card. So it was pretty huge. And then that unit effectively being a morale 4 is really solid. So I think with Jor, you've just got to worry about Walder Frey. But if you put Varys into one of your lists, or, yeah, you can't bring Jor NCU, obviously, if Jor's your commander. If you put Varys into one of your lists and you stop Walder from really blanking that unit, I think it can end up being pretty solid. And another thing, I guess, that we kind of overlooked with Craster, since he can do the zone replace, you can use him to block zones that you don't want your opponent to have. So in the case of Walder Frey, it's just as well to plop Craster down onto the crown to stop Walder from shutting you off. Then you've only got to worry about Varys for really 2 rounds, because if you let your opponent go first, then Walder doesn't matter in round 1. Round 2, you can Craster to the crown, and then you only really need to spend a Varys token the other 2 rounds to block Walder. So I think it's pretty good, and I think he's got potential, particularly in such a panic-heavy meta. Is he better than John and Alistair and Othel? Maybe not. But if you want to just have a Death Star running around, that's Jor in a unit of Sworn Brothers. It's just so gross.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Jaeor is actually my favorite commander in Night's Watch. I played him the second I saw he saw his changes like in 1.5, I guess. And I even ran him at the Paris tournament with surprisingly successful, like not always, because there were a couple of matchups that were kind of hard for him. But especially in the Night's Watch mirror matches, he did like a lot of work for me. I love Jaeor because of this, as you said, Kingsguard-esque Swarm Brothers unit. It feels like amazing to play those guys. Like this is again one of those units that feels truly elite, and it's just a lot of fun playing with his cards around because you are very flexible. You are dishing out vows constantly, using them like some sort of ammunition, and you, as you said, you can pull off some really surprising, cool combos that you wouldn't be able to pull off before because your vows are constantly active, which is just bonkers. It's just amazingly good. Like I think this attachment, commander attachment, is probably one of the best in the entire game. Like we even rated it once. If we would give him like points, we would rate him at 4 points or something like that because he's just so good. Even those +2 to morale is just ridiculously powerful in a lot of game modes, especially Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons to capture objectives. And as I said, he's my favorite commander because his playstyle is very dynamic. It's very cool. It's not static like other commanders. Like for example, Otel is very straightforward in the sense that you are just basically enhancing your attacks. There is not much to him and to his playstyle. But Jaeor is more about when do I have to use the right vow in which situation. And the only thing I think that's holding him back are still his tactic cards. Like I'm going to make the argument that his cards are kind of weird designed in such a way that you are, for example, discarding your vows, which you need to be effective, which is kind of, I understand the concept behind it, but in the practice, I played like a lot of games with him. Unwavering Conviction, I think that's the card I'm talking about. Yeah, it can work out pretty good. For example, if you just reduce to 1 rank, if you're having just 2 guys sitting there and they are attacking as if they were full unit, it's amazingly strong and amazingly cool. But discarding those 2 vows attached to this unit hurts a lot. Like I don't understand why this card, like it has a lot of caveats to it. Like you need to have vows attached. You need to perform a melee. No, you need to perform an attack. So it also works on range attacks. That's the only thing going for it, I guess. But yeah, you have to discard all vows afterwards. Like, couldn't it just be 1 vow? Why do I have to discard all of them? It's just a little bit too much for this minor. It's not a minor effect, but it's an effect that's very situative. And most of the time, this card even blocked my hand, and I had to discard it in a lot of rounds. On the other hand, the card I personally love is, and I think that's his strongest card, it's, how it's called, Duty to the Watch. That's the one with the morale check. This card is extremely powerful, and the reason why Jaeor right now sees a lot of play, because Baratheons, for example, in combination with Melisandre and Roose, are ruling the panic mechanic right now. Like they're the king and queen of panics, and Jaeor is like, okay, I have actually some tools to stop you guys. And it's kind of fascinating to see when Melisandre is pulling off 3 wounds from their wardens and letting your Swarm Brothers doing this check, and you are just auto-succeeding with this card. It's amazingly strong, amazingly powerful, and works even very well against neutrals and Lannisters as well. And this card makes Conscripts incredibly tanky. Like it's a ridiculously good combination because Conscripts 8+ morale are horrible, but with this card, they are surprisingly tanky. They won't fail that as much panic test as they did before, and can just stand wherever they need to be and target an enemy unit even more effectively. I ran a list for a very long time that included Swarm Brothers with Jaeor as a commander. I ran Swarm Brothers with John and Trackers, and a unit of Conscripts with Alice of Foreign, the attachment. and then I had Donald Noy, Corin Helfand, and Craster. And this list was surprisingly flexible, and especially the conscripts with Alistair were extremely tanky. Like they stood toe to toe to almost everything they got engaged with, and the Vicious from Alistair also increased their offensive capabilities, and because of his at any cost, they also were able to succeed on a panic check every round automatically, plus the Geo card, Duty to the Watch. So I think Geo overall is a great commander. He's just not as strong as the other options, because he's more a dedicated choice to some specific matchups, I guess. Like if you want to have a commander that is dedicated to stopping panic shenanigans, I think Jer is your commander to go. But other than that, I would rate him like on, I don't know, maybe place, not even at the top 3, maybe, or maybe top place number 3 or something like that. Yeah, across all commanders. Probably not. Yeah, he's just incredibly fun, but his cards are weird sometimes. Like, for example, Night Gatherers is a great card on paper. It's like a tutoring, right? You can just draw a vow, attach it to a unit, but then you're like, I don't want to really attach a vow to a unit because I want this effect from the card. And if you have like Bowen Marsh and Craster, and you have played Horn That Wakes the Sleepers, you are diminishing your deck, right? So this card is getting basically not as much. It's losing in value the more cards you draw, because you only can draw a vow from your deck, which is getting reduced by all your card draw mechanics from the Night's Watch. It's kind of weird. It's kind of very, very weird. Sometimes I don't understand what the intention behind this commander was. I guess they wanted to have a flexible one, and including with those panic stuff, but it's weird. I just wish they would tweak his cards a little bit, and then he would be in a very good place, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he's still an interesting choice. Like you said, in specific matchups, and depending on your local meta, or if you're going to a tournament and expect certain factions more than others, I think he should be considered as an option. But I think the other 2 options, which we will discuss in a second, are a bit more competitive and more universal effective. And I think the next one would be
just to say, he's also probably the coolest looking model in the Night's Watch.
Yeah, of course.
This model is just that's the reason I'm playing him actually a lot, because he just looks cool on the table. Like,
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I think in general, Night's Watch has quite cool models, even if they are less dynamic than newer models. But I think they have definitely their charm, how they look, and yeah, I quite like them. It just has this Night's Watch trim, dark. It's like you're looking at guys from the wall. That's exactly the aesthetic they have, and they captured it pretty well, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, to the other commanders. For the other 2 commanders, Alistair and Ortel, there will also be an article to each of them on this month's skill drop. One is written by Brett. It's about Alistair, and the other one is written by Carlo. So if you want to know more about them, also check out the articles. And yeah, that's also a reason why we will make it a bit more shorter than with the other 2 guys. So first one would be Alistair. I think we can say that Alistair's more of a control commander. He has some ways to control the battlefield, and It's not that he's is control heavy, but he has tools to play around, and I think he's pretty interesting.
Yep.
I personally don't know exactly how to play them. That's the reason why I would be also happy to get enlightened by you guys.
Go ahead, Brett. You even wrote this article, so you have more insight there.
Yeah, so I think Alistair, it's the combination of those three cards, and with Ruthless Approach, it's kind of the timing where you can play that card. So normally you would think a card like that, specifically when it's, based on zones that you control, it might have to be like the start of the round or something. But being able to play it at the start of any friendly turn and kind of catch them by surprise adds to that mystery. Because I think most of the time your opponent is going to know what this card is because it's so dangerous and it's so versatile. But they're going to have to guess when you have it. And so are they going to play to the zones that they don't want you to control to make that card powerful? Or are they just going to play their game the normal way and potentially let you get those zones to shut them down? Excuse me. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but controlling the wealth and the crown zone is going to completely screw them on their defenses. Taking 2 away from their morale tests and taking 1 away from their defensive saves, they're just in big trouble. But the other zones are amazing as well. Controlling the letter, you shut down their unit and their attachments abilities. Controlling the swords, you take 2 attack dice away. So for things like the Free Folk Bear, the Free Folk Giant, Scorpions, Builder Scorpions, the Stone Thrower. What other things come to mind? I guess even the Mountain That Rides, dropping him down to 2 attacks. Any Dire Wolf having 0 attacks. Just anything like that. Taking 2 attack dice away from something is pretty substantial. If you think about it, if you control the swords and the letters, it's essentially martial superiority, except for all the time. Minus 2 attack dice and no abilities. So it's pretty devastating. Knocking Lance Cavalry down to 4 attack dice and no Lance ability. They're not going to do one single thing when they charge. And then minus 2 movement from the maneuver zone is amazing. I mean, if you're playing Dance with Dragons, I guess their movement 0, right? Or would you modify their movement value first? No, I think they would be movement 0 because
they would
the
be 0.
All applied. So they can't even, they can't even run away. Sorry. But in just bogging them down, like if they're on a corpse pile, like say they're Rose Knights or Lannister Guard or something on a corpse pile, like, bro, you're movement 1. Like, where are you going? You're not going anywhere. And so it's so good. It's so good and it's so versatile. And as mentioned in my article, like if you think about it, you could potentially have 2 of these cards in hand. If you control the letters and you decide it's time to throw down on this enemy, you could potentially take Corrin Halfhand, Walder Frey, and these 2 cards and effectively blank 4 units in 1 round. Like, yeah, it's bad. Like, people hate Tywin and Walder combination. Like, I lost 2 units. But Alistair's like, you just lost 4. You lost 4 units this round. And that's, it's really scary. But if you space it out, it's just so nasty. And then, like I said, combined with his other cards, like Pathetic Attempt is a mind game of its own. Because Starks like to send in a Dire Wolf for like a really quick hit, a little bit of chip damage. But it's like, man, if I don't have Winter is Coming, and this guy has Shield of the Realms of Men in his hand, and he blocks all of these hits, the dog's automatically dead. Shut off a giant's abilities, and I don't know why they would do this, but if you've shut off a giant's abilities and it chooses to attack you, and it gets Pathetic Attempted, it's bad. Same with a bear. It's basically automatically going to trigger it. But a bear also with Shield of the Realms of Men, it could just kill that bear right then and there. So Pathetic Attempt is a really scary card. It's a source of auto wounds where Night's Watch lacks that, but it's a lot because if it's Alistair's
unit and they're at full ranks, it's 5 automatic wounds. That's really, really nasty. So he's kind of playing psychological games with you the entire game, because it's like, well, I can go attack them, but maybe I'm going to take 5 wounds just for attacking. And then maybe at the end of that attack, I'm going to get vulnerable and panicked laid on top of me as well. And then he's got the ability to recycle, seeing their flaws. That's really, really good, because with Bowen and Craster, as we mentioned, you can just go grab it right back. So Alistair's really strong. He's got a lot of psychological elements to him to kind of scare your opponent, intimidate him, and just control the flow of the game because they're afraid of those cards. And then his order's not bad either, at any cost. Huge in Feast for Crows, huge in Dance with Dragons, huge anytime. But then Prey on the Weak is so good in crossbows, potentially giving them 9 attack dice hitting on 2s. Combined with some of these other effects, it's just it's kind of gross to even think about. Like those crossbowmen with seeing their flaws, if you're -1 defensive saves and -2 to your panic test, they could really just, if a unit's on 1 rank, I'd like to think it's dead. Vulnerable, panicked, -2 to saves, -2 to morale, I don't think you're living. Really nasty.
Yeah. So overall, lots of control in there, and lots of ways to combine his effects, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. His cards just synergize so well with each other, because stripping them of abilities makes it a lot easier for you to trigger Pathetic Attempt. Stripping them of their defense joins really, really well with seeing their flaws. So I see all 3 of those cards kind of coming together and working together to set each other up. And I think if you play Alistair the right way and you build the right build, it's probably just a bloodbath. And you're just playing to just throttle your opponents. And against free folk, if you put seeing their flaws down and then charge with Sworn Brothers, I don't think they've got much chance to live just through those 2 tokens alone. Like if you run into a unit of Raiders with Sworn Brothers, you should be one-shotting them every single time you charge.
Yeah, for sure. And also after you talked about Ruthless Approach, which with the unpredictability of the card, also what you need to take into account is that all of your Vows cards from your basic deck also need tactic zones. So your opponent not only need to take into account that you could have Ruthless Approach and could play it, but you also need to take into account that you have these Vows abilities at best on your units already, and he also wants to deny you the Vow effect. So he in the end, it's a lose-lose situation, because I think one of a few of this the stronger abilities from Ruthless Approach, for example the letters, isn't exactly the correspond with the zone, which you would say for example the swords or the shield, which are very strong war effects, but they are not in the same zone, like for example the ladder for Ruthless Approach. So in the end, he is in a lose-lose situation, and for whichever zone he decides to go on, you get a benefit at some point on a battlefield, even if it's not Ruthless Approach. That's yeah, that's something I find pretty interesting.
Yeah, totally. I think Alistair is one of the top 3 commanders, actually, maybe for the Night's Watch. This Ruthless Approach, one of the coolest cards in the game, hands down. It's just extremely flexible. It's very cool designed. I love this card. There's so many ways to apply it very effectively. As Brett mentioned, all those possibilities before. You played him a lot recently, like very lot. Because I was searching for another commander. I wanted to give more time, dedicate more time into. And Alistair is extremely fun to play as well, like combinations with Bow and Marsh and seeing their flaws to recycle this card, as I mentioned, is one of those ways. A Ruthless Approach is an extremely powerful and cool card that you can utilize in so much different ways. Even Pathetic Attempt is just in combination with Prey on the Weak. It's just a lot of Alistair has a lot of synergies with himself. It's kind of interesting. Like, you can make this argument for almost every commander, but I think he stands a little bit out of this. He's a little bit more special in that regard. Like, if a unit is attacking your Swarm Brothers with Alistair, which is my preferred unit with him, maybe surprising for a couple of people, because most tend to, as Brett said, tend to put him into crossbows, which is totally a valid option. But it's kind of harder to pull off the maximum effect of Pathetic Attempt. Someone is charging your Swarm Brothers. They don't lose a rank thanks to Donald NCU, for example. You can play Pathetic Attempt, dish out 5 wounds in best case, and then strike back with Prey on the Weak with +1 to hit from your Swarm Brothers. So there are 8 dice on 2s, which it's just a great little cool combo. And Alistair is, in my personal opinion, the best grindy commander right now for the Night's Watch, because he can just whittle down the enemy. Even if he's losing ranks, as long as the enemy is losing ranks as well, you're totally fine. You're going to win this engagement in most cases. Just keep him alive with some of your NCUs or with cards, and then you should be totally fine. Yeah, I think he's awesome. People should try him out. People should give him a chance. He's a very good commander, and I think even in the TSL, a couple of people are playing him right now. I don't know how many. With not a lot of success, maybe, but I think he's also a very hard commander to use, because you need to anticipate which zones you want to take in a specific round and when you want to apply those cards. Like, Ruthless Approach is a very powerful card, but you need to understand when you get the most out of this card.
Right. Okay, I think that's it for Alistair. And we can hop over to our last NCU, which our last commander, which is actually an NCU commander.
Yeah.
So I wasn't that wrong there. So our last commander is Orthe. He's the one and only NCU commander, or true Night's Watch NCU commander, if we don't consider Roos as commander for Night's Watch. But yeah, Orthe is an NCU commander, and in the current meta, NCU commanders have an edge over regular commanders because they gives you an activation for free. Okay, John would be a case where you also get free activations with Ghost.
Yeah.
But yeah, Orthe is not only an NCU commander, he also has 3 great cards which buffs your attacks. And I think that's also the reason why we see him a bit more than usual. So Ilya, do you want to go over them? I think you played him quite often.
Yeah, he's my most played commander at this point. Yeah, I mean, the choice is obvious. He's the NCU commander for the Night's Watch, so therefore he's getting played a lot, and I played him since the release of the Heroes Box 1. I'm going to admit, I actually don't like him. I think he's very bland to play. He's very straightforward. There's not much to him, and his cards are just enhancing your attacks and in a lot of different ways. And yeah, you can pull off some very cool combinations with that. But compare it to the other commanders in the Night's Watch and their play styles. I think he's very, very straightforward, and hence why I don't like actually playing him. But the thing is, he is the NCU commander for the Night's Watch. Therefore, you will get a free activation on that board, and you are getting more points that you can invest into your strong elite troops, or you can even build a conscript army and with senior builders and stuff like that we have talked over. Orthe is a good commander, but if I compare him to other NCU commanders, I think also that he is kind of okayish. Like, my personal best combo I always find to use or utilize with him is Crossbowman with the Mighty Enhancement, which is a powerhouse of an attack if you can manage to pull it off. And the fact that you can basically recycle those cards in the late game when NCU activations are not that important anymore, as in round 3, 4, and so on. You can basically get those cards back, use them again for some devastating offensive attacks. But yeah, I just wish at this point that there might be another NCU commander, maybe some alternative, because I'm getting the same fatigue as I'm getting with John right now with Otto. Like, I played him so much that I just don't want to play him anymore. But he is right now the best choice if you want to be successful in the competitive environment. You can make the case for the other commanders as well that they can stand up toe to toe to other competitive lists. But Otto is probably your best choice with John together. And yeah, I like him. But I'm just getting a little bit tired of him. Maybe that's the case here I'm trying to make. I think, Brett, what's your opinion on Otto right now?
He's. I know that he's one-dimensional because it's offense, and offense. But oh god, he's really strong. He's a good strong pairing with what I'm running as like a Jon Snow kind of activation heavy, tanky kind of list. What he does for Builder Crossbowman is just disgusting. But it's not just that. He takes conscripts and he gives them bite. And he takes ranger trackers and ups them to 10. So, but his cards just seem to fit so well with certain units. So for me, Mighty Enhancement is just perfect for ranged units, the trackers or the Builder Crossbowman. Precision Enhancement is just a godsend for those Sworn Brothers. The Exploding Sixes. I think the Exploding Sixes really started with that card. That card was the only way to get precision, and then they kind of started divvying it out to Sirio Farrell, and Loris Tyrell has it. Ooh. And who else? Oh, the Unsullied have precision as well.
Yeah.
So I think they liked what they built with that, and then they kind of ran with it. But it's just so good on Sworn Brothers. And then the Serrated Enhancement works either for the Sworn Brothers to give them the coveted 3 keywords of destruction, but it's good on Ranger Trackers, it's good on the Crossbowmen, and it's good at letting those conscripts get that chip damage that you see from like the Free Folk. Just lots of scrub attacks causing panic damage. So it's really hard to sleep on him. I like him because he can get you out to 9 activations with conscripts pretty comfortably, but those conscripts end up punching so far above their weight class, it's kind of ridiculous. They can do some serious work. And that's kind of my Baratheon / Lannister build, is the Crossbowman with a unit of Sworn Brothers, a unit of Ranger Trackers, and 3 units of conscripts with Athel, Corrin Halfhand, and Craster, and it just works. It works. It does a pretty fair amount of work. I just ran it today into Lannisters. It did pretty well. It did what it's designed to do. You can out-activate them, and you can get your Crossbowmen up onto their Crossbowmen, and your Crossbowmen are better because you can give them rerolls. You can give them an extra attack dice with Halfhand. And if you want to play the Lannister game, you can give them kind of a pseudo Cersei, because they can be vicious and knock the Lannister crossbows down to basically a 10 for their panic test. And if they fail, they're weakened. So then when they try to return fire, which that's kind of a funny dynamic anyway when the two ranged units are teeing off on each other. Like, all right, which ranged unit's gonna win? Like,
Yeah, that's right.
Pew,
But-
pew, pew, pew,
Yeah,
pew.
I think in that match of the pew pews, you've got to give the edge to the builder crossbowman because Othel can give them those rerolls. And outside of Lightbringers and a Cersei influence kind of quote unquote creating vicious, there's not other range that can pick up panic modifiers outside of corpse piles. So it's pretty huge. So I still kind of like him, but I would prefer Alistair as a pairing, but just right now in this meta, for the time being, Othel's going to be my go-to. But I think once the Watch Marshal's out and can help Alistair get his activations up to 8 pretty comfortably, Alistair would probably be the better shot. But I just, for the time being, I've chosen to go with Othel in the Ohio event as well. So I don't really care. The lists are locked in, so
you don't have a choice anymore.
Yeah.
Just be honest here.
Yep.
Yeah, and also I think Author is also quite easy to use commander. The few times I played Night's Watch, he was often my choice because you can't do much wrong with just buffing your attacks. Even if you buff them at the wrong time, you still buff them and you still get the benefit, which isn't the case for every tactics cards in the game in general. And it's just easy to use to just buff your attacks. And yes, you have these combinations like you guys mentioned with some units benefits more from different cards from him, but yeah, I think him giving you free activation, also quite good tactic cards, and also pretty easy to use, I would say. Yeah, makes him a strong commander, and
Totally.
I quite like him as somebody who only plays Night's Watch occasionally. And yeah,
I remember a time when Flateman got critical blow and vicious all the time, and that in combination with Autel was ridiculous. Like giving him precision enhancement.
Yeah.
Don't remember us on this time.
God. Yeah, when I very first started playing Night's Watch, I just wanted to give them a try after Gen Con when I was kind of deciding who was going to be my second faction. It's weird because I swore for so long. I was like, I will never play Night's Watch. Because, like, at the time, if you remember, like 1.4, I was playing Tyrion, and I hated Night's Watch so bad because I Bowen Marsh Craster at 6 points, and combined with the Horn that wakes the sleeper, I just couldn't stop their cards. I couldn't stop it. And so I hated them, and I was like, I will never play Night's Watch. Then I was like, well, they've got their new commanders, so now maybe you'll see something other than Jon Snow with 5 6-point units, and then Craster, Bowen Marsh, and Varys.
Got even worse.
God, that list was so annoying and so hard to deal with. But I was like, I'm going to try this Othel guy because nobody's trying him yet. And I was like, you never see Flademan with Night's Watch, and nobody's giving Othel a fair shake. I'm going to run him. So I had Othel, and then I had Sworn Brothers with Lord Snow, and then I had Flademan, and I can't remember what else I fanned the rest of the list out with. It might have just been 2 Ranger trackers, and then it was Othel, Ammon, and I don't quite remember, but it was really stupid. Ghost not allowing defensive saves, so it was perfect to give him vicious. Lord Snow's unit with precision, Flademan with precision, and sundering. They gained sundering and the exploding 6s. It was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it was just, you would just steamroll whatever you went into.
Yeah, but to be honest, what we need to note here, these were old, the old units, so most of them got reworked.
Oh yeah, sure.
For some point. Sure. So yeah,
pretty much for those reasons, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Swan Brothers for 6 points.
Yeah,
quite strong.
Yeah,
they were really good for 6 points.
But to be honest, at the beginning, list building was quite easy because we just took Swarm Brothers and sometimes Ranger Trackers. And today it's a bit difficult. That's, I think, we should say this at the end of our podcast, that list building with Night's Watch isn't that easy, because you have good units and have good combinations you can put into your list, but most of your units, besides Conscripts and the new Marshal, are pretty expensive. Starting at 6 points for the trackers, then you have 7 points for the Swan Brothers, and 8 points for the veterans. And you have all of your units are in a very expensive point range. So list building isn't that easy as with other factions like Starks, Baratheons, who have quite good 5-point base units. And so you need to decide more, and you can't feel it's just difficult to field that much units. And if you field something, or you want to field something, you need to adjust your whole list, because you have to spare the points at some point, which I find always interesting when I see new Night's Watch concepts, because you have to break the idea of your list before to get it to a new idea. And yeah, it's quite interesting. And I just wanted to know at the last note what you guys think of this kind of mentality on list building, and how difficult it is for you to build lists.
Well, lists right now with Night's Watch, yeah, it's difficult. Like, the moment Swarm Brothers got changed, everything kind of changed in the Night's Watch, because all of a sudden you didn't have those spare points. You couldn't get up to those high activation numbers that easily any longer. And then they introduced Conscripts, which are supposed to be the filler unit for the Night's Watch. I totally get that concept. I totally get what they're trying to do with this faction. But I think it's not working out as they intended. And they should reconsider, for example, Conscripts, maybe turn them into a unit that fills the gap between 4 points and 7 points, which, if you think about it, is a huge jump. Like, jump from Conscripts to Swarm Brothers, 3 points, that's incredibly high.
That's Marshall.
Yeah, for example, yeah. And I mean, if you're taking a look at other factions, you have, let's take a look at, I don't know, maybe even Baratheons. So it doesn't even matter. All of them have the standard 5-point infantryman unit. Then they have something for 6, and then they have something for 7 and 8, and so on. Like, they're very flexible in list building. Night's Watch, it's like you're dedicating a couple of elite units, and then you're filling everything else with conscripts. I don't see this is the way this faction was intended to be. Like, I can't imagine that this was how they planned it out to be, and I really hope they change something about it. I really hope they change conscripts to something that is filling this gap, and I would love to see them losing maybe insignificant and getting something that allows them to get buffs the longer they prevail on the battlefield. Like, they can stay at 4 points, but their increase in point value the longer the game is going on. Something along the lines, like, as I said, like, list building wise right now, my hands are very much tied. Like, I'm kind of forced to play conscripts. Like, I don't have to, but if my list wants to, succeed, then I probably need to play conscripts in this current meta, which is a little bit frustrating, not gonna lie. I really don't want to play them, but I need to. And I don't want to play a gunline faction. Like, I dedicated dedicated myself to Night's Watch because I wanted this elite faction, not this gunline weird pseudo free folk thingy. Like, right now I'm comparing Night's Watch to the Imperial Guard from Warhammer 40k, where you have those cheap soldiers you're throwing into the mix, into the meat grinder, and then you have those tanks sitting behind them and bombarding the enemy. Like, it's literally one-to-one the same tactics, and that's not what I was getting into. I wanted the Space Marines of Westeros, right? I wanted those guys who are just like those couple of guys coming in there, bashing in some heads because they're so well trained and so elite. But yeah, list building is it's hard. It's difficult. It's manageable right now with the help of the Watch Marshal, especially. But it's still a challenge, I guess, with Night's Watch.
So how's for you, Brett?
I think I'm with him. It's a little bit tough, but they can be pretty flexible. You've just got to have a little bit of faith, and I guess kind of have the nerve to run double Ranger trackers sometimes to kind of fill that out. So, I mean, yeah, you've got the 4-point unit, and then you've got the 7-point unit for infantry, but kind of in between, you've got the Ranger trackers. And I know it's really scary to run 2 units of them, but it can be really good. I faced a guy in a 50-point event that ran 7 in an auto list.
Wow, okay.
And I was running like an 11 activation Stark, but that's 10 activations, and he nearly tabled me. It took everything that I had in all of my, like, I guess I count as like a wily old veteran at this point, but I had to pull like every single trick that I know from my gaming experience to pull it out. And he hadn't played that many games, and he just kicked my ass with all those trackers. They're just so good. I don't know that I would run 6 and 2 NCUs or anything crazy like that, but maybe you could get by with running 2 or 3, especially in an awful list. It's kind of scary, but maybe you could. I don't know. You'd have to try it. But they can be really good once they start lapping around you and play some of Othel's cards. They can really just do so much damage to even elite units because of that vulnerable token and being able to get that panic damage in. It can get really scary. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I wish they had some kind of cheap 5-point unit. Like, definitely not going to be what Sworn Brothers used to be, but maybe a 5-point unit that's just got vanilla attacks. They hit on 3s. They've got a 3-up defensive save. Something somewhere in between Conscripts and Sworn Brothers. Something not quite super elite, but not as fragile as Conscripts. Yeah. Some kind of like special wall guard or something. I don't know. I'm not the designer, and I'm not the fluff guy, so I don't know what that unit would be, but I would be okay with something like that. But I think for the time being, we're going to have to just accept the fact that we've got 3 points from the Marshal, 4 points, and then a jump up to 6, and then a bunch of 7-pointers. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I still love the Night's Watch, so maybe I should give Cutthroats in Night's Watch a fair shake too. I know that they can't take vows, but when you've got the horn, you can play some like the shield on a neutral unit and then pick it back up for your elite unit. It's not the most ideal thing in the world, but they could probably get a fair shake. I think in an Othel list, they could be pretty nasty because you can throw critical blows or sundering on them. So it might be worth it.
Sure. Sounds like an interesting idea. Definitely. Yeah, and Cutthroats are just good as the 5-point units.
Totally.
Even if you don't get that much benefits out of your cards, I think they are worth to consider. Sounds interesting.
And they synergize very well with the conscript recruiter. Yeah, right, the recruiter.
Yeah.
So it's kind of more effective bolt flyer, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, fine. Do you guys have anything you just want to say about the Night's Watch before we finish this podcast? Brett, do you want to go ahead?
They're just really fun. I think they're forgiving enough if you're a newer player to get into them, and you can probably pull off some pretty neat combinations. Just don't fool yourself into thinking that it's always going to be that easy. Like if you're getting started with your gaming group and you're playing Night's Watch, you're probably going to win a lot of games. But they've got a pretty nice beginner-friendly approach. But I think they've still got a pretty high ceiling for skilled players. I think there's still plenty of room to play around and just make better use of them when you're a good player. I like them. They're really challenging, but they're also really rewarding. So I think they're a good faction to get into. The starter box is good enough for you to get your teeth cut with the game, and you can have some success with that starter box, and then they've got plenty of room to branch out. And I think, like we've mentioned, they're an up-and-coming faction. So I think that they'll make their way back into, if not a top-tier army, I mean, somebody's got to be at the top, but I think they'll at least be able to compete with everybody.
Yeah.
There for a little while when they were the 6th worst, right? Just worst. It felt like we were in a pretty tough spot, but then I think once we started to explore like the conscripts and some other things, there was some light at the end of the tunnel. So I think they're worth playing and sticking to.
Yeah, definitely. Ilya, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So I know I sounded a little bit very pessimistic there in the last couple of minutes. So, but don't get me wrong, guys. Like, Night's Watch is my most favorite faction out there. I think they are an extremely fun faction to play with because they have this unique vow mechanic, and yeah, I just can agree with Brett here. Like, it's the most beginner-friendly faction out there. I would make the argument maybe on par with the Baratheons are kind of hard to use. Nah, it's kind of Night's Watch. It's still kind of it was Night's Watch, and it's gonna stay Night's Watch, I guess. Because if you buy the starter box, you're getting a lot of value for that box. You can build a very solid army just straight out of this box and compete with other players. But as Brett said, just don't get fooled. There's a lot to learn about the Night's Watch, as we mentioned with the commanders, for example, like Alistair Thorne. If you want to play him, you have to dedicate some time into this commander. You have to learn every tooth and cranny about this guy to be effective with him. But it's also very fun. Like I think this faction is very dynamic. It's maybe not as fast and as mobile as Starks and Targaryens, maybe not as defensive as Baratheons, or not as control-y as the Lannisters, but you get something out of everything here. And if you want to specialize into a specific play style, you can do that with Night's Watch. You are literally getting a toolbox here with this faction, which I personally love about him. I really love the initial design of this faction. I just hope that this future for this faction is getting a little bit brighter in terms of design and of balancing. But they're still super fun, super cool. I love the aesthetic, and you should just give them a try. Play a couple of rounds with the Night's Watch. I think they're worth it. They're worth your time.
Yeah. And for me personally, even as a player that doesn't play a Night's Watch that often, it's always fun to play with them and always fun to play against them. So yeah, like Dada said, try them out. And if you also want to learn a bit more about the Night's Watch, this podcast was part of this month's Guild Drop about the Night's Watch faction. So go to the A Song of Ice and Fire Guild and just look at the other drop parts. There's the battle reports, there are articles, there's also painting tutorial. Just check them out. Yeah, and give the Night's Watch a try. For you guys, thanks for coming and thanks for this amazing podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's always my pleasure to talk about the the men on the wall.
Once you go black, you never go back, I guess, huh? Because even if I'm going to play, Greyjoys, the Night's Watch always gonna have a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Then thanks, guys, for listening, and we see you in the next episode.
Bye bye.
Bye.
See ya.